Hey everyone, welcome back. Another episode of Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. I'm Josh Fox, your host. Today we have back on the program our COVID correspondent expert, Rebecca Jones, the founder of the Florida COVID Dashboard and the COVID Monitor, which monitors COVID in schools. She burst out onto the scene when she was fired by Ron DeSantis, the governor, for refusing to falsify data in the state of Florida. She has been on the front lines of this battle to keep us healthy, to keep us away from the coronavirus from the very beginning, and it's an incredible honor to have her back on the program. It's rough times. It's tough days right now. We started this program in March 16th, to be exact. We called it Staying Home because staying home was a call to action. Normally our calls to action are not staying home, they're going out, doing stuff. Our call to action right now, our battlefront, is to stay away from the coronavirus, to keep ourselves and our world and our relatives and our friends healthy. We can't afford to slack off right now. And this is the hardest time to do that because we all want to see each other. And it's really hard to be outside in most of this nation because it's cold. This is one of those times that try men's and women's souls. This is one of those moments. This is going to be the winter of our discontent. This is going to be a moment which defines our character. To think that we still have to stay home because of the incredible mishandling of this crisis on behalf of the Donald Trump administration and so many other things. We are about to see a way forward. We may see a way forward with vaccines coming, with a new Biden administration. We're going to talk to Rebecca Jones about these things. But the sad fact remains. New Orleans today announced they were canceling all Mardi Gras parades. We are going to see more cancellations of this sort of nature. And we have to, I beg us to take this seriously. This is an endurance race. We have to stay home, stay inside. We have to stay away from the disease. Well, not necessarily stay inside. We can go outside and get some exercise. We have to follow the protocols. We have to try to beat this horrific pandemic back. We're still here, folks. And that's why we're bringing you this program. That's why we're making sure that there's quality conversations, that we can continue to dream a dream of the future, that we're going to learn from this, that we're going to emerge from this cocoon of the coronavirus stronger. So stay with us. This is going to be a groundbreaking interview with Rebecca Jones of the Florida COVID Dashboard and the COVID Monitor. This is Staying Home. It's a great pleasure to bring back onto the program Rebecca Jones, the originator of the Florida COVID, oh my God, no, I'm going to mess it up. COVID Monitor, COVID Dashboard.
There's a bunch of them, so it's okay to get them mixed up.
The inventor of every piece of technology in Florida monitoring COVID. How about that? You've been on the show so many times now that you're practically our personal COVID correspondent, which I appreciate a lot. No, I do. Because it's one of those moments right now where COVID is surging. The mayor of New Orleans just announced that all Mardi Gras parades will be canceled, which is unbelievably tragic. It's one of my favorite things to do.
Why do you think I'm burning my Louisiana candle back here?
Well, and I am in a studio now, and I got a notification today. COVID is spiking. I don't know if it's safe to be in this building. We're going to go over some of the things that everybody needs to know right now. But before we get into this new spike of coronavirus, which has been extraordinary, when you have Donald Trump refusing to concede and Mike Pence on vacation in Florida, go out, find him and say hi, and ask him what he's doing to stop the death of 1,400 Americans a day. But talk to me about what's latest in terms of the tech that you're working on now before we get into this spike, if that's all right.
Okay. Well, it's kind of all connected to the spike because we work on things as we see need for them. And we're really hoping, especially at the COVID Monitor, that we don't have to keep doing this for much longer. This was never a project that I anticipated would last as long as it has. I thought for certain the CDC or the Department of Education or both would want to have the final say on what's going on in schools across the United States and wouldn't even leave it up to, a couple of scientists, a Google engineer, and, a bunch of volunteers. So it's adapted a lot. And we passed.
Because when you first started this was to monitor COVID cases in schools when children were about to go back into schools, like in August, right?
Yes. And at that point, there wasn't a single state or district in the country reporting cases in their schools. And so when teachers came to me to report them, I didn't have a mechanism for them to do that in any kind of meaningful way, except for to send them to a reporter. And eventually there's only so many that a reporter can handle. So I thought of this, secure server to allow teachers, parents, even high school students, if they knew of something, to report it. And that created a lot of pressure on states, because the last thing that any state wants is for its own teachers to be reporting the numbers and them accidentally be duplicated or something. They wanted the word on what was going on. And that pressure, first Mississippi, first state to start reporting in every single district in their state, for them, not the state that you usually think of a leader as things, and they were. And then states started to fill in after that, and now we have, I think, nearly 1/3 of all the districts in the United States are reporting either independently or are captured by their state. And this is also keeping in mind that large swaths of California, Washington, Oregon aren't open. So a huge chunk of the ones that are not reporting are just simply not open right now. And we've had to expand our data systems and all of that along the way. But we're really hoping right now that with the new administration that cares about science and children, that this will be where it should have been from the start. And that's in the hands of a joint CDC Department of Education task force, specifically looking at schools and children as part of their overall COVID response plan. And then I'll be free.
And you'll be free to what?
I'll be free. It's so much time.
I know you're trying to get the Biden administration to pay attention to you and to hire you, which I would recommend. So let me ask you this. Have schools been a significant source of this new upswing in cases?
Yes, they have. And there have been multiple studies that have been released that have said that. We passed 150,000 cases last week or earlier this week at the days.
Per day? Per day?
No, not per day. Total. And again, this is of 1/3 of schools reporting, and most of them haven't been open for more than a month or 2 months at most. And so there are huge gaps in that data that need to be filled. And the recent uptick in cases, because some districts only report active cases, they don't keep a cumulative total, is very alarming. Very alarming. And I've actually worked on research that's under review at the American Academy of Pediatrics about how cases in schools coincide with cases in the community, how you can reduce them by reducing class size, significantly reduce them, and a whole bunch of other models and measures that we did. But none of that.
So what are some of the things that do reduce it, aside from reducing class size? Does that have to do with how far desks are apart, indoors, outdoors, ventilation? What are some of the things that do that? Let me just say, you're tuned in to Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. Stay with us. You're tuned in to Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. I'm Josh Fox. I'm with Rebecca Jones talking about coronavirus.
Again, the tragedy. Again. So the most important finding was that if there's a high transmission rate within the communities, you shouldn't even be discussing opening up schools to in-person instruction, period. If there's a high incident rates in the community, it's going to be high in the schools. That's just how it goes. It's common sense.
Logic. Yeah.
Next to that, class size is the single most important influencer in case spread in schools. So if you reduce the in-person, obviously this is all referring to in-person attendance.
Right.
If you reduce the in-person attendance rate, especially in high schools, by 50%, you reduce the case rate in schools by 37%, which is no small change. I know everybody's talking about how all these small businesses are going out and we have all these empty facilities. You know, we could be opening or paying rent to some of these businesses for auxiliary facilities for schools so that we can space out children. Because in-person enrollment is just basically a measure of how many people you have in a confined space for a prolonged period of time. And the more people you put into said space, the more likely it is that A, one of them has it, and B, other people will catch it if they're in that room for a long period of time.
It's got to be almost impossible to concentrate on schoolwork in a situation where you're wearing a mask. There are all these protocols, probably, right? I hope so.
Depends on where you're at.
And you're distracted by this constant fear. I don't think I would be able to concentrate.
Yeah, there about a third of Florida counties don't require masks.
A third don't require at school.
At school. Well, probably more than that don't require them countywide, but within schools, there are some school districts that require masks where counties don't.
Is there data on that as to whether or not those are the schools? Are those schools more spreading at higher rates?
It's really hard to tell from the data we get because most of the places that don't have mask requirements are very rural or remote areas.
So they're not.
So we have very small number of cases, you know, towards our population. So you have to account for small numbers problems, and it's a little bit harder to discern rates compared to, you know, Hillsborough, which has had more cases than all of the New York City school district system.
In one school?
In Hillsborough County.
Hillsborough County.
And the New York City school system has 5 times the enrollment.
Well, what I did, we are going to have Ron Russell, who's a very important educator in New York City, on the program later in the week. He runs a huge theater education program in one of the largest schools in the Bronx, and another number of other schools in New York City. And what he was telling me that nobody's reporting, and you might be interested to talk to him about this, was that in Evander Childs High School, which is normally a 2,400 student high school, 2,400 students, attendance on the day that I spoke to him, which I believe was Thursday, was 52. 52
Is that students. People opting for virtual or
No, these are just kids that have disappeared and they're no longer being tracked by the system at all. You're talking about some of the poorest schools in the Bronx in New York City. And these kids have no place to socialize. So I would hope, other than their homes and their neighborhoods, but that I would hope that maybe take a look at that program, because one of the things that he was saying was that it's not just that there are schools, yes, where they are tracking coronavirus and doing all the protocols. There are the gifted programs, the wealthier schools, whatever, wealthier public schools, right, in wealthier neighborhoods. But in the Bronx, 52 people attended school out of a 2,400 student high school, would seem to say that people are just not going, and they've lost reach with some of those. So that's something to look at. I don't know how that factors into your world.
Yeah, that's why I asked about absenteeism versus like being on quarantine or something like that. That's a problem we've seen in a lot of other places, but not something Florida is actually even reporting on.
Well, neither is New York, is what he's saying.
So yeah, I don't know. I'd have to look more into New York's data, but I have to say from what I did, it's doing I actually use New York and Kentucky now as the exemplary,
as the model
examples of how to report.
I'm not using
that's
this
a little
to
disheartening to hear.
Yeah, I'm not using this to challenge you. What I'm suggesting.
Oh no, I'm fine with being challenged. Don't want to be wrong.
Adding something to the mix, which is that there is no one New York City, and there is no one public school system in any place.
I was including all New York's city's population of students who attend.
Right. I guess what I'm saying is that the disparities in the school systems right now are enormous, and they're not being paid attention to, even in places run by liberal Democrats. But let's move on. So the new spike that's happening is terrifying. And what would you attribute it to, apart from the schools? I know here in New Orleans, we arrived and people were all of a sudden sitting inside restaurants without masks on. This was 3 weeks ago. And I looked at that and I went, okay, we're in trouble. And we're going to have a huge spread. Watch. And so, of course, we didn't go eating inside restaurants. We went, if we did go out, it was outside, That's what they've done a lot in a lot of cities, is put like restaurant seating outside. And I noticed that at the place where I love to play basketball, all the rims were off. They took all the rims off, which was cause for a lot of creativity. It became a roller park, and then people were doing a game where they could hit the square with the ball. But today, I noticed, in the midst of canceling Mardi Gras, they put the rims back on the basketball hoops today. And I was like, which direction are we going in? So why don't you tell us a little bit about what the risks there have been? Why is this spike happened that seemed to spread out of the Midwest? I know this isn't exactly your area of specialization, but please do give us some information about that, because I think information is so important right now.
Yeah. And I mean, my specialization is, and always has been, at least during this pandemic, is to track how cases are moving through people and over space and over time.
Okay.
Now, as far as, virology and mRNA, I couldn't tell you anything. But as far as where things came from and where they're going, yeah, this particular wave isn't necessarily originating from the Midwest, but it is where it has taken off like rapid fire. Okay. There have been indications that this was coming even in Florida over a month now. We've been seeing things like ER visits for COVID-like illness and influenza-like illness increasing, just to tick up here and there. And then you put on top of that relaxed restrictions, which haven't just happened in the Midwest, they've happened everywhere. And a certain series of events that took place in October and into early November that may have served as super spreader events.
What were those?
Large groups of people gathering within a confined area for long periods of time, breathing in the same air, not social distancing. That those people went home, and for the next week, they went to the grocery store, they went to the gas station, they put their kids in school.
What were those events?
That is how it spreads.
But what were those events?
Donald Trump's campaign events, which attracted thousands of people from all over the region, who then again, they went to gas station, they coughed into their hands, they put their hands on the, muzzle, or they were in a small room with all these other people waiting to get into the other room. And then they were left in the cold for hours, or so I heard anyways. And maskless.
Oh, no, that was definitely true.
In close quarters.
Maskless in close quarters. Right.
And then on buses back to and from the parking lot and everything else that was happening. It shouldn't be controversial to say that we got a very large group of people. We know at least some of those people there were sick. And a much larger share of people who walked out with the virus. And they went home and they brought it in. And they went to restaurants indoors and all the other things in the places where they live, where they don't believe that there should be any restrictions. Now, a lot of them are in the hospital and a lot of them are dead. And a lot of people they infected are in the hospital and dead. And I say this as somebody who has family in the hospital right now. I found out last week that my aunt has pneumonia, severe COVID-19, and is hospitalized.
In Pennsylvania.
And
where many of these rallies were.
Yes, in rural Pennsylvania that went 85% for Trump. That's where the part of Pennsylvania is where I grew up. I was actually trying to find if any county went more for Trump than my county in Pennsylvania.
Green County?
Bedford.
Bedford County, right next door.
Very red. Yeah.
Well, you're on the opposite end of the state from where I was at. And we actually saw a blue shift of a whopping 4 points in the direction.
Well, boy, I'm pretty sure they saw a red one.
Between 4 and 8 points. But I attribute that to the fact that there was a huge flight out of New York City, because of COVID. And all these New York City people ran out of town 2-3 hours away from New York City and bought houses. You can't buy a house in Wayne County, PA. And if it's out on the market for 6 hours, they've given like twice the asking price and it's gone. Jesus. Because New Yorkers, rich New Yorkers, are fleeing the city in droves because of COVID.
Well, they're about to hit
the Pennsylvania winter. They're about to hit the Pennsylvania winter, so I think they'll probably be like,
probably go back. Yeah. I was in South PA, so our winters weren't quite as bad, but I did go to school in Syracuse, so I know what those northern PA winters are like.
Oh boy.
But yeah, her and her son and all three of his kids have it. I found out yesterday that my nephew and my sister in Mississippi all tested positive, and my nephew's very sick. He's 13. And so much for, not being symptomatic. Miraculously, the only people in my family that have not caught it are my sister, who's an ER nurse in New Orleans and has been since the beginning. My father, who's a truck driver and goes to every single possible place in the country. And me, the scientist who's been working in close proximity with first responders since the beginning of the year. We're the only ones who haven't had it. My mom, my aunts, my cousins, my other sister, her kids, they've all gotten it.
Let's not get too hysterical, though, because early on in the crisis, first, before I get to this question, I have to say, you're tuned in to Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. We'll be right back. You're tuned in to Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. I'm with Rebecca Jones. We're talking coronavirus. We have to be talking coronavirus still. When it's over, we'll have you back on to talk about climate change. But for now, we're going to talk about coronavirus. But let's not get hysterical, because I remember in the beginning of the crisis, there was a doctor from New York who was in the midst of this all, who was saying, put out an hour and a half long video, very calm, very deliberate. And he was saying, look, I'm working with COVID patients. I wear a mask. I Purell my hands. I make sure I don't touch my face. I'm not going to get this disease, period. End of story. Now, I don't know what happened, if he got it or not, but he was very confident about the fact that if you did all the things that you're supposed to do, you can prevent it. You can prevent yourself from getting it. How is that borne out over the...
Partly true. I mean, I wasn't saying that I haven't gotten it and my truck driver and nurse, relatives haven't gotten it as like some conspiracy, just more as like, what are the odds? And I mean, I worked at the
Well, you would know what the odds were, actually.
Yeah. They're pretty low.
You're the only person.
Yeah. Working at the State Emergency Operations Center, where there was a huge outbreak and the whole thing had to be shut down and sanitized like 2 weeks after I got fired. It's kind of surprising I didn't have it. But no, people can do a lot to try to mitigate the chances that they will get it. Masks, obviously, those are to protect you and other people. Not going out to crowded restaurants, things that just don't put yourself in a room with other people, and I mean, that's really what we've been saying since like the beginning.
Yeah. Don't put yourself in a room with other people. But what if it's almost
voluntarily,
impossible?
at least, don't go out of your way to go eat at a restaurant indoors. That's crazy. And, wear your mask when you go out and all the other protocols, wash your hands, all the things we've been saying since the beginning. And you still can catch it. There was actually a piece that came out today, I think in the Wall Street Journal, about how people are catching it in places where they thought were safe. And I almost commented, where you're safe? Home alone. That's where you're safe. And that's it. But I didn't want to be snarky.
But what about...
But that really is true. That's the only place
you live in an apartment,
really safe.
Should you be worried about opening the door into the hallway and that kind of problem?
That's outside my area of expertise. But if you don't have a choice, then you don't have a choice. Not everybody can afford just to, put a down payment on a new place and move out because it's more spacious. And so I wouldn't, sometimes it's really hard to talk to those folks because none of the answers you ever could. It's like working in South Louisiana with climate change. You're always the bearer of hard news, and it's never fair. And that's a hard message to have to deliver. But if you can avoid it, then you should.
I've said over and over again on this program that the rate of death for coronavirus and also the rate of infection for coronavirus has to do, to a degree, with both pre-existing conditions or comorbidities, as they call them, right? But also whether or not you're living in a polluted area, right? The cofactors of lung disease, heart disease, cancer, which correspond with living in an area which are polluted, right? We know that the fossil fuel industry and the pollution of the fossil fuel industry kills 5 to 7 million people every year. And, that is a pandemic with a worse death toll, right, than the coronavirus. are we, am I wrong with that about that?
No, I wasn't going to correct you. No, I wasn't. I was going to say, but those are also comorbidities of poverty.
Yes.
Of racial segregation.
Yes.
We don't collect data about the socioeconomic status of people who are cases or who are tested or anything like that. To a lesser extent, we get it by occupational data of people who die. And that is as close to a proxy for socioeconomic status as at least we'll get in Florida. Other states obviously can collect whatever data they want. This is why having a standardized reporting procedure, an investigation procedure at the federal level would be incredibly useful. But here in Florida, we don't do that. We have occupation data for people who died, most people who died. And there's already the limitation of who's getting tested that you start out with. People who have access to healthcare, that's who gets tested. I saw, because I was interested in getting tested 2 weeks ago, that there's only one testing center that's free that's run by the state in all of Leon County. There used to be 6, and there's one. And guess what's that?
Why is that?
The center of a college campus. It is on the center of a college campus. Yes.
So even going there is difficult.
Yeah, and there was always a line. Dangerous. There was a line the first time I went there. Right. And if you want to go somewhere else, you have to pay between $20 and $115 to get it done. And that is more than many people can afford, especially right now. So we're already capping out the number of people we're testing. We're not collecting enough data about who's positive. We're collecting some data about deaths, but it's not accessible to the public in any way. So it makes it nearly impossible to show these disparities, which I'm almost certain exist. And that's incredibly frustrating. And it's not just because of, proximal poverty, as we say. It's also to do with the types of jobs people are working. So people who work in the service industry tend to be lower income than people who work in offices and are working from home. So even if you're eating outside, your waiter is probably in a lower income class than you are and is far more exposed day to day serving people than I am working from home, or any researcher is working from a remote location. And so all of those exposures factor that into that as well. And that's why I always say, to the extent possible, try to protect yourself and limit your interactions, because a lot of people do not have a choice.
We're going to call the show, "To the Extent Possible, Stay Home and Limit Your Personal Interactions." It's a little long, but we're going to work on it.
No, that'll be my best catchphrase yet.
Change
acronym.
Whatever the acronym is, right? Okay. So let's just go to the flip side. Let's for a moment see the light at the end of the tunnel. Yes. There's some very promising vaccines that we're hearing about, 2 of them. And we have a huge world change. Democracy beats fascism in America, at least at the government level, not at the personal level. And what I'm asking you, I think, let's look at the positive side of the spectrum. Knowing what you know, that we've just seen democracy defeat fascism, authoritarianism, and ignorance, let's just say, at least at the government level. We still have plenty of authoritarianism, fascism, and ignorance in the general population, but we have defeated that at the level of government. What do you hope for from this Biden administration? In your view, what do we need to get this under control starting January 21st, and how long will it take?
All right. Well, I'm glad we don't have to cover the interim between now and then, because that really will be the darkest days. But once that does come around, a national, federal system for tracking cases, tracking the data about cases, making things available to researchers so that they can model things as they start to pop up. You can't just model a state, you need a region. This kind of interest in researchers has been long, desired and never fulfilled. And a vaccination plan and deployment that includes free vaccines that's targeted to maximum efficiency, so that you don't have to inoculate 100% of people in every nursing home. You may only have to do so many percent to create herd immunity within that environment, and then you can start working on the general population. You need scientists running it. You need scientists running the show. That's what
Are you seeing that? Are you seeing that from the Biden administration? You're seeing hopeful signs?
I have. I've been following very closely what's going on in the new Biden administration with regard to COVID and climate change. And they are letting the scientists take over the show. And not just scientists from government backgrounds, but academic backgrounds. I think one of the leaders of the new task force is being plucked from Yale University and her research medical facility. So this is a very good thing. I'm going to be very happy to see that people like Scott Atlas are not driving the political messaging of a virus. First, there shouldn't be any political messaging of a virus, but that they'll no longer be the official federal voice of our country. Messaging is important because even though Pfizer and Moderna may have a vaccine, and the Pfizer one, especially out of Germany, is incredibly effective and had nothing to do with United States funding or Donald Trump. It was done by German scientists, German engineering, and getting people to take it is going to be an issue. It is already an issue. Tons of people have already sworn off that they're not going to do it. A month ago they were saying, "Oh, I'm going to take the Trump vaccine as soon as it comes out," and now they're saying, no, they're never going to take the government's, vaccine. And there has been a trend in this country of anti-vaxxers growing for years. I watched it as I tracked measles and a ton of other viruses that are deadly and damaging, especially young people, at DOH before this. So convincing people to take it is going to be the most important part of this, because we can have the best vaccine in the world, and if we don't get enough people to take it, which I think Fauci said is upwards of 75%, then instead of being back to normal fall of next year, which is our best outcome, then we're going to be continuing to deal with this every year until people buy in, and they may never do that. We can't get, herd immunity from the H1N1 vaccination that we put out every year. That's been killing people for 102 years. So this might become part of our annual seasonal influenza bunch that comes and wipes out tens of thousands of Americans every year. So we really need to get on the vaccination messaging and deployment and making sure it's accessible to those vulnerable communities.
So you're saying that these super spreader events, which makes a lot of sense. If you look at the map, it's the Midwest. It's
always trust your map.
Wisconsin, Michigan, PA,
Pennsylvania,
Ohio. You're talking about places where Trump had these mega rallies. You're tuned into Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. I'm Josh Fox, and we'll be right back. You're tuned into Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. I'm talking with Rebecca Jones. Rebecca, so best case scenario, we have people who, we have a big program run by scientists under the Biden administration. We have vaccines that potentially come out in the next few months.
And excellent science communicators there to lead the charge.
Right.
Hopefully.
Well, that's why it's so important to talk about this on this program, right? But that does not solve the underlying endemic issues of poverty, of racism, of pollution that are all you have to do is say the words Cancer Alley, and you know that what is that? That is environmental injustice, and that persists. Is there any talk among the scientific community of bringing a corona? Because this is what my new film is about. Taking the coronavirus messaging and climate and pollution, environmental messaging in the same thought, the same sentence, because in fact, they are related. They're deeply related, as we've seen from the science. But also, if the cure for the coronavirus is a vaccine, the cure for the planet is the Green New Deal. Are we talking about those things in the same sentence?
No, not right now. I think it's partly strategic, because people can really only focus on a handful of things at a time. And especially if you're struggling to feed your family, you may not care about an environmental plan that you don't understand how it impacts you, but you do understand this virus and the fact that you can't go to work. And it's also because of these academic and professional boundaries that exist between the general medicine and epidemiology and things like physical and earth science, which you're talking about. And then even to another extent, social science and racial injustice and poverty. And those kind of boundaries have been long established. There's something that geographers really try hard to break down, but getting people to realize that environmental justice is racial justice, that it is economic justice, has been, I think, the fight of many scientists for some time. And I hope that with Biden making climate change and environmental justice, and he uses those words, environmental justice, to the forefront and making it one of the main pillars of his campaign, that we can make people understand that. That's something I want to be part of, because it's with any situation, the poorest, the most vulnerable, the disadvantaged are always the first to get it, always. And they're usually the ones who are contributing to it the least. Like if you look at, South Louisiana and Native American tribes there who have lived there for 5,000 years and didn't even, know what cars were until the 50s. And yet in that same time period, their land has all but disappeared. And so it's always the people who are at the bottom. And I think getting people to realize that most of us are at the bottom and, that we're all vulnerable to these things is important.
Rebecca, though, isn't it interesting that in politics and culture and art, I think we're seeing a lot of that intersectional conversation be such an important part of this new environmentalism, this new political philosophy, this certainly in terms of racial justice is definitely movements happening. And that's what this program is all about. It's about this new conversation that is about intersectionality, right? The idea that we can't have a Green New Deal unless we have racial justice, that we have to serve frontline communities. And who are those frontline communities? They're the ones who are suffering from poverty and from racial injustice. In the science, are there similar types of reaching out? When you talk, the way you sounded, it sounds like scientific community is rather siloed, which is necessary for specificity, I guess. It sounded like what you were saying. Is there a similar type of reaching out within the scientific community that you're seeing happen? And if so, or if not, how would you like to see that happen?
Somewhat, but it's not mainstream. It's really kind of a handful of people who have kind of had those interests for a while. Who were further developing, those ideas and concepts in the public light. But no, I don't see an overarching, exodus of silo science into kind of a community science that we really need. I think the foundation as far as ideology is actually there for most Americans. It's horrible, but if you say they found a new disease or virus, people are probably going to guess that it was in a third world country because they associate rampant spreading of disease with poverty. They already make that connection. Even if they don't realize it, they make that connection. Again, the problem is making those people understand that in this country, most of us are not the priority. We're not the people that are going to be protected. I'm not. You're not. Those people don't do interviews like this, or they do, and they're usually full of bad grammar and fact errors, but and yelling occasionally, and orange spray tan. And I'm pale as a ghost. I'm almost pale as this white stuff. I don't think I could pull off orange. But yeah, no, I understand that intersectionality. Getting all of epidemiology who's having their moment. You have to keep that in mind too. They are having their moment, once in 100-year moment. And I don't know how many of them are willing to share that moment with other subfields. But epidemiology was founded within geography. It is a child of geography, studying how things move over space and time. And geography is also understanding earth science. And it's also understanding racial injustice and economic inequality. And that's why I'm a geographer when people ask. It's because we work on all those things, realizing that not one of those things happens without touching the other ones. And I think that from some of the people that Biden's put on his staff, I expect to hear more of that conversation, but it really depends on how much more they flesh that out.
So you said don't touch on the darkest period, which is between now and January. What do we in the last 3 minutes that we've got? What do we have to do to get through this period of time? We're talking about 2 months. It's almost November 17th, right? So 2 months until the inauguration, and then of course another month for those policies to take effect. What is it that, what are going to be your guiding lights, your guiding thoughts to all of us to get through this moment? What do you expect to see?
This is, I think, the first time that you're going to ask people to sacrifice something that isn't material. No Christmas, no Thanksgiving, no New Year's. We're going to just have to stay home. That's it. And it's surprisingly a lot, because I think as a society, we've been through it this year, and all we want is to be with the people who love us. I get that. I want it. But we can't. Because if we do that, we're going to kill a lot of people that other people love, potentially people that we love, potentially ourselves, our children. We can't do it. We have to understand that actual sacrifice isn't just staying at home on the couch. It's giving up something that really means something to you. And that's going to be this entire holiday season. Holiday shopping. Don't do it. Thanksgiving, stay home. My God, Thanksgiving, stay home, please. And Christmas probably as well, and New Year's, and all of those things that we love that define our culture, those moments of closeness with family and friends, we are going to have to lose them this year if we want to save lives.
Right. And that's not easy, because there's a lot of pressure.
No, it's not. No, everybody
from a lot
wants
of corners.
Everybody wants to see each other. I think I don't have a problem with Xing, shopping, because I don't really care. But I don't really do that much of it anyways. But it's just part of who we've been for so long, that giving up, July 4th and some of that, which caused the spike in Florida, or, certainly exacerbated it, wasn't as hard as saying no Thanksgiving, no Christmas, no New Year's. And that's, I think, something people need to understand, that even if it looks better right before Christmas or New Year's, doing all of those things are going to make it worse again. And we cannot do that. Our healthcare workers deserve better than spend their Christmas and New Year's, mopping up guts and diarrhea off of the floor, because so many people didn't want to listen to the mask mandate and not go to Walmart at midnight or 8 p.m. the day before, whatever ridiculous hour they're open now. And, mass consumerism and your family. You're going to have to wait. You're just going to have to wait.
How incredibly ironic that the people who watch Fox News and the Trump supporters, the super spreader rallies, have actually won the war on Christmas and canceled Christmas this year.
They won't. They'll still do it.
I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, that is amazing to me that you're saying that. And of course, we just saw New Orleans cancel Mardi Gras parades.
And that's quite a few months into the future as well.
That's
so at least they're thinking ahead.
That's February.
Yeah.
So,
but I guarantee you there's probably no cancellation of a lot of the other things that would probably be helpful to cancel, indoor dining.
Well, that has to happen as well. But listen, Rebecca, we're out of time. Thank you so much for being with us. I can't believe that 7.5 months into this program, or whatever it is, 8 months, we are still called staying home, and the message is still stay home. So people, listen to Rebecca, listen to the science, stay home. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.
I'll predict right here for you, Chris. I think Donald Trump will leave office before his term is up. He'll be humiliated, embarrassed, and I know him. He's not going to want to lose, and he's going to run for the hills.
You got that bet all day long.
Okay, let's get after it. Now, so look, Jake has made some good predictions, and this is in good fun. I could not disagree more.
There's a little bromance between the two of them. You got that bet all day long, Janky, you. Oh, you stop. In the meantime, let's call him out on the damage.
No, but
I just got a Roku set. Did basically a little bit of channel surfing, and I was like, there we are. Yeah. There we are. And then I turned it on, and it was John and Brett on Damage Report making fun of me.
Oh, no.
So you are so busted. I even took a picture of it, okay? And they're talking about my predictions. I got a new prediction for you, John Idarola.
You're doing a show
It's blowing the doors off everybody.
Young Turks is the largest online news network, not a big deal. We're gonna rock the boat. We're gonna be counter-establishment. We're gonna tell people the truth to the best of our abilities. We're so sick of this corruption. We're not the robots on TV. I actually care about the news. Guilty, I care. Fourth day on Occupy Wall Street. Last night we launched Wolfpack. It's us pushing our ideas out there, trying to help the country in every way that we can, trying to make this place just a little bit better.
Reporting from the Hillary-Bernie debate, I gotta be honest, you know what we do, we cover it for real.
For us, this system isn't working.
Free and fair elections.
And when he told the cops that day, when they came to drag her away, and he said, if you're gonna chain her, you're gonna chain me. If you're gonna arrest her, you're gonna arrest me.
Hi, I'm Bartholomew Joseph Kyle. I do audio for the main show, The Young Turks. I also do audio for Post Game. I started in 2006. I met Cenk Uygur at the Iraq for Sale screening that was directed by Robert Greenwald. And watching that, I want to figure out a way to be part of something that's genuine and authentic.
Welcome into TYT, The Conversation. It's Adrienne Lawrence, and it is a great day to talk to clinical reviewer on political affiliation study for the Recovery Village. I'm talking about Stacy Henson. She's also the community outreach coordinator for Advanced Recovery Systems, and she helps families, clients, organizations really find quality treatment options for mental and behavioral health disorders. Thank you for joining us, Stacy.
Absolutely, thanks for having me.
Yes, and as I understand it, you all surveyed 1,000 people nationally to see how the events of 2020 are really impacting our mental health when it comes to substance abuse and how we're handling the situation. What were those results and what do they look like?
You know, Adrienne, they were actually very striking. I think that mental health and substance use are not always talked about as much as they should be, but what we're starting to see is people are paying maybe a little more attention. And I think that the outcome of what 2020 has done across the board. And so we can look at the COVID piece. COVID-19 has had an incredible impact on people's mental health and substance use. We look at the social justice issues and the stress that that's brought home, close to home, on TV, looking at it, and how it affects our neighborhoods and our relationships. And then we look at the election and the impact that had on people, different parties, different perspectives.
Wow, it has been one of those years that we want to forget, but unfortunately we probably never will forget, particularly when we look at the impact that's left behind, particularly about COVID-19 and the death count that we have going on right now. And something that I thought was pretty interesting is that your survey results showed differing ways of handling it based on political party. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely, it was an interesting piece. I love research because you can pull different components and really kind of draw a different picture to let you see how different aspects of people's lives and who they are impact, or how it impacts how they choose to deal with things. And so what we found is breaking it down on the impact of mental health. Republicans found that they reported that they were more stressed by the financial components of COVID-19 and that piece was more difficult for them. Independents seem to be struggling more with the stay-at-home and quarantining order. And then Democrats were concerned about, getting sick or a loved one getting sick. And they included the election and social justice in there as well for them.
And something that I saw that I thought was kind of interesting was this thought that mental health is under siege. Can you explore more of that, and what do you mean by that?
Well, I think, Adrienne, it's under siege because people are being tested in ways that we've never been tested before. I mean, my generation has never seen anything like this, and I hope I don't ever see it again. But we're looking at having to deal with a pandemic in a way that, we're flooded with information, which is fantastic, but sometimes that information overload can be very distressing for people. It's hard to know when to step back from that. And then the other huge piece of it, when you look at mental health and you look at substance use, is most people's general resources and what they turn to help manage stress has been taken away. And that's where that quarantining piece comes in. So if you're used to be someone that would go to the gym and exercise and that helped you de-stress, or if you would hang out with your family or your friends and that's been taken away, school for the kids, right? So everything has changed. So what our normative function and our normative ways of coping have been challenged. And one of the things I keep reading about that fascinates me is the longer this goes on, the more distress people are showing, because maybe we're able to cope in small chunks of time, but is the unknown of when is this gonna get better just drags on and has a larger impact on people's ability to cope.
Yeah, and that's actually very scary. And especially when we look at, like you said, these outlets for coping with stress, how those have been taken away from us. So what outlets have people turned to now that you've seen really seem to take the rise and account for the majority of the outlets people are now using?
Well, what we're seeing is people are falling into old habits, unhealthy behaviors. We're seeing an increase in substance use across the board. And that can be simply people having more alcohol. That seems to be the biggest one. It's more accessible, it's legal, you can have it delivered to your front door, right? I mean, there's so many pieces that come into play with that. But we're seeing anecdotally
an uptick in overdoses from people that are not, that are relapsing, that maybe were in long-term recovery. I work with a guy who he's based out of Sarasota, and in his recovery community, he's been in recovery for over 10 years. He lost almost, I think it was around 10 people in a month period after COVID hit. Accidental overdoses because they were people that had been in recovery and made that first use and ended up killing them, and it's tragic. So falling into old behaviors, looking for some way to connect and cope, and it just isn't healthy.
Wow, tragic indeed. That is incredibly unfortunate. And when we kind of look forward, since we don't really have an idea of when this will end, yes, we've had several pharmaceutical companies say that they are on the verge of getting some kind of treatment out there, but in reality, how do we see this impacting people in the long term?
Well, I think what we're going to see potentially, I just had this conversation with somebody the other day, is where people are learning how to cope in different ways right now. What's going to happen with the transition back? And part of our study looked at our school kids more anxious about returning to school, and there was an uptick in anxiety for the kids, even the college kids. And so we're looking at what is the impact as we try to get back to whatever the new normal is going to be. And that may be people realizing, wow, I've been drinking more than I realized, and I'm not actually going to be able to get back to work in the way or the capacity I used to be. And so I think the hurdles ahead of us may be the manifestation of the change in the behavior during the COVID quarantine period or the stay at home, and how people are choosing to navigate back to work. And I've talked with HR people, EAPs, looking at how do we help our staff get back to work.
Yes, yeah, because that seems like it would be quite the journey to have to go from this current situation back to this sense of what we knew to be as normal. And so if you were in control of everything and you had unlimited resources, how would you make it happen so that it could be a smooth transition?
Well, I think communication is imperative in that regard, as are resources. So we need to make sure we're communicating openly with, whether it's our staff members that are coming back, it's our family, it's our colleagues, however that dialogue happens. I think, again, that's one of the pieces I hope that comes from all of this, is more of an open dialogue about substance use, mental health, need for resources. Have those conversations a little bit more openly. And the more we talk about it, the more we recognize what needs to be put into place, because I think some people just hold it inside. Some people do things in secret, whether that's using or they isolate. But I think overall, it's just a better communication between each person and how they need to cope more healthy.
Yes, because I was kind of just brainstorming the thought of, is this something that really can be ushered in at the state level or the federal level? But it's something that we definitely need to provide support to people, not just an economic support in terms of the stimulus, which is very important, but also having these mental health and these support systems in place for people as they try to transition back to this normal. And I'm sure, Stacey, you're someone who follows the news and is kind of mindful of all that's going on. What do you think right now is maybe the sleeper in terms of news coverage that may be causing people considerable trauma in this moment that they may not be fully cognizant of?
I think that everybody's going to tune into things that they're more engaged with, and so that can be kind of an independent decision, based upon each person. I think that, a lot of what's going on, we might see some positive pieces, but I know there's a lot of anxiety going into the holidays, the seasonal change, what's going to happen next. There's hope with the vaccine in place. There's still some unknowns with the election and finalizing all of that. So I think that people kind of key into the places for them, but I think holiday stress is normal anyway. You add this pandemic, you add isolation, you add quarantine, and how do we stay connected and live our lives, right, with our loved ones through a time of year that usually is joyous, still with that unknown of what's to come. So I think it's kind of, I almost feel like people may be holding their breath, waiting to see what's next.
Yeah, that sounds very accurate, as many of us figure out what or if we're going to do anything for the holidays because we want to stay safe. But then on top of that, we have to bear in mind that there are a number of people out there who will not have family members around for the holiday because they've been taken by COVID-19. And it can be just a very solemn just existence, unfortunately, right now, which is usually a very cheerful time of the year. So I guess what would you recommend to our viewers to do to really see if they can stay on top of things?
I think the best piece, again, is to start talking more openly about what we need. And sometimes we don't know. So maybe that means we need to reach out to somebody. One of the things I think that is positive that's come from COVID, if you want to twist it that way, is people are having access to healthcare in ways that they've never had it before. So having telehealth and virtual resources out there, people can connect to therapists, group therapy, 12-step groups, their primary care physician, right, through telehealth. So there's ways to connect and ask for help. And I think that that's the biggest piece of this is trying to recognize what you need. If you notice somebody that, again, friend, family, colleague that seems to be struggling, ask them. The Recovery Village, we have a myriad of resources on our website. We just launched a new wellness app called Swell that's free, and it has relaxation and meditation exercises, journaling exercises. So really kind of getting to some basic coping pieces that can be very healthy to help you navigate just day-to-day stresses. And if you have additional mental health or substance use issues, it takes you down a path that's even a little bit more deep into the therapy piece.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us, Stacey.
Absolutely.
We are onto something that is going to be amazing, but what we need is your help.
The number one problem is there's too much power in too few hands.
Every single problem that we have can be traced back to dark money.
They take large donors, they serve large donors.
So these handful of gatekeepers try to dictate everything.
Like all of you already know, they don't work for you, they work for their donors. So fire them and hire people who will only work for you that say no corporate back money.
We are going to change the way we elect candidates in this country.
Uncorrupted Democrats. We're gonna fight for the issues and win on policy.
This is incredibly personal. We need free healthcare for everyone.
We're fighting for $15 minimum wage, single payer healthcare, debt-free college, and we are gonna get money out of politics once and for all.
I've taken a public pledge not to accept any corporate money.
Because the last thing we're gonna do is go into another presidential election and run a corporatist against a populist candidate.
At some point, the buck needs to stop, and it's gonna stop with us. It's gonna stop with Justice Democrats.
So who are we?
People who do not take corporate PAC money.
We're relying on small donors.
99.9% of our contributions came from people.
You're a Justice Democrat, so you don't take any corporate PAC money.
I'm not influenced by money.
As a Justice Democrat, I made that pledge.
Not a penny.
Absolutely no.
I will go to Congress unbossed and unbought.
We try to create a government which works for all of us.
That is what America's about, and that's what a representative democracy should be about.
We are just getting warmed up here.
Vote for uncorrupted Democrats.
The fight starts now, it starts today, and it starts with you.
I've been honest with him. Like, yeah, I was upset with you and I shouldn't have done it. But instead I was like, I'm just trying to protect my engagement ring.
Did you know that more than 20% of the world's oxygen comes from the Amazon? Why? Because of trees. I know what you're thinking. Of course! So what do we want to do? We want to plant more trees so we can save the climate. It's quite literal. So that's what leads to our new partner, Plant Your Change. Love it. It's so easy. What they do is you take the credit or debit cards you already have and you plug it into the system. And if you so choose, you get to round up every purchase to the nearest dollar and they plant a tree for you. Okay. Now you could also choose if you want to do it on only certain kinds of purchases or only so often, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But literally every cent makes a difference here. It's Plant Your Change. And if you want to know more information, just go to tyt.com/trees. Let's go save the planet together.
Hey Georgia, we're not done yet. I'm Dr. Lena Hamilton, poet and educator out of Atlanta, Georgia. And I've got a message for you. You, yes you. If you're gonna be 18 by January 5th, it's time to register to vote. You have until December 7th. We have an important race coming in the Senate runoff, and we need your vote. So get out, get registered, and let's get voting.
Today, a terrible day for the internet, a terrible day for America. The internet as we know it is not going to exist anymore.
A real dark day for information, and yet another way that they're bleeding out the democracy.
We're now going to have these gatekeepers of information deciding what we can and can't see, and that's what scares me the most.
Whether you're conservative or progressive or anywhere in the middle, this is the one thing we should all agree to. Protect the internet, because the establishment is coming for it. Don't let them destroy the internet.
We return with TYT's The Conversation, and now joins us Assistant Professor of Sociology at McGill University, Barry Eidlin. Barry is a comparative historical sociologist, and he's interested in studying class, politics, inequality. Welcome in, Barry.
Glad to be here, Adrian. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us, especially during this time, which is so interesting, especially given that Trump has lost the election, whether he admits it or not. But I know you realize that even with the election loss for him, it doesn't mean the end of Trumpism. So what do you mean by that?
Well, so Trump represents many different things. He has his personal peccadillos of his bombastic and cluelessness and that kind of, and this sort of bumbling style of leadership, but he also represents a type of politics. And that is something that, that sort of more authoritarian brand, that nationalism, that appeal to racism, to that America firstism, that has a long tradition in American politics, that he sort of distilled into this new form and clearly has an audience in the American electorate, particularly in the absence of compelling alternate visions.
Very interesting that you say that it is a brand of politics as well. At least I'd like to think that we had evolved past it. But the reality is that no, it's very much here alive and well. And so who do you think is the last politician that really reflected these qualities of Trumpism?
Well, I mean, an obvious one would be someone like Joe McCarthy. That would be obvious. But there's a whole. I mean, you can think back to the days of like the America First League. This is something that really is a throwback to really the early 20th century in a lot of ways. If I'm putting my sort of comparative historical sociologist hat on, and obviously updated for today. So where you have where the other is something different today. It's Muslims and immigrants and particularly brown immigrants, and but that's where that tradition comes from. That sort of nativism that goes back to the early days of the Republic.
And we had that in the early days, and then it really seemed to evolve and we moved past it. So what happened there in terms of why we said, hey, this is no longer gonna work for us?
So I think that there we need to really think about America's position of global leadership that it asserted, particularly after World War II, where it became the dominant, to use a big sociology word, hegemonic power in the world, and that kind of America firstism became more of an idea of sort of positioning America for global leadership. So I think the flip side of that is that the return of that type of ideology could be viewed as a symptom of an America that's losing its grip on that position of leadership, and that sort of turn inward then is a sort of grasping at straws in a context where America is actually losing its global position in some ways with the rise of these competitors, particularly China, which obviously occupies a lot of Donald Trump's minimal brain space.
So if I can kind of, I guess, translate your university speak, I'm kind of getting the thought that you're saying that we were like really a big deal back in the day. We're not so much anymore. So we got super insecure and we brought Trump in because we wanted to feel like we could flex. Would that be accurate?
That's not a bad translation, I would say. Thank you.
You're welcome. That's kind of what I do. I translate good things. But Trump is not necessarily a good thing. So how do you think Trumpism will play out when it concerns the future? As we know that there are hints out there, and that hint kind of coming from Trump and his crew, that he is going to run again in 2024, as there definitely seems to be a platform for this caliber of nonsense.
Yeah, so he's definitely asserted his control over the Republican Party. And so it's going to be very hard for competitors to make a move. I'm actually less worried about Trump, the individual, and more about the ideas. And my bigger worry is actually something that you were going to have a politician who has similar politics without the personal ineptitude and bombasticness, who's a much more competent politician. Because that's really, why Trump was lost in the end was really just his inability to govern, really, and his willingness to basically just insult his electorate and just these personal qualities. But those politics in the hands of a much more capable politician are actually something that's much more worrisome.
Absolutely. This thought that you could have someone who has a little bit more tact and knows how to adhere to decorum, yet still has these baseless and disgusting and revolting kind of ideologies, but maybe also brings charisma to the table, could be very, very threatening, considering the constituent base out there who really seem to like this thing. So I guess, where do you see America moving in the future in terms of maybe how we can stop this from happening?
Yeah, so I think the big thing to understand here is that we're in a crisis of political representation on both the right and the left. So the Republican Party, obviously, we've been talking about that. Trump's taken it over, and there are a lot of people on the Republican side who feel left out of that. But over on the Democratic Party side as well, there's a huge crisis of political representation there, in that the huge numbers of Americans who really want these broader political visions, are not seeing themselves represented in the Democratic Party. So you look at the data and we see huge support for things like Medicare for all, doing something for climate change, whether we call it the Green New Deal or something else, criminal justice reform, racial justice. There's broad support for these things. And yet within the party, there's huge contradictions and people saying that we can't touch listening to the 10-foot pole and so on and so forth. So I think that what we need to see going forward is if there's going to be a constituency within the party that can actually articulate that broader vision. We saw that somewhat with Bernie Sanders, who obviously fell short. But to the extent that we can see a broader political vision that actually speaks to the sort of fundamental needs of everyday Americans, that's going to be a ticket forward, I would say.
Yeah, and that would be a very powerful one. And so I guess when it comes to who can make that happen, I know you kind of mentioned Barry Sanders, but kind of falling short. Is there
not
someone
the running back, Bernie Sanders, the politician?
Yeah. And so when you talk about, who may be out there that has this full package that could really change it all, who are you thinking?
People obviously talk about AOC, who's not of age yet. But I think that where I'm seeing hope in the current political landscape is in that new layer of left political leadership. The squad has expanded its ranks in the most recent round with Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman. The Democratic Socialists of America endorsed candidates. I think they won 20 of 27 of their endorsed races. And there's basically what I'm seeing, is a new layer of political leadership that is emerging amongst today's young people that is really inspiring, as someone who's really came of political age in a period of decline and really a wilderness for the left. So I don't want to necessarily name check any individuals, but I think that there's what's more important is this broad layer of political leadership that we see emerging amongst today's young people.
Yes, and hopefully there will be a lot of inspiration there, because we do need those new voices and that change. It's just, when we unfortunately look at our leadership, they tend to all gravitate toward one direction, and we need, fresh blood, new ideas. And so in terms of the work that you do, is there anything that you see on the forefront other than this Trumpism that you think people need to be paying attention to?
Well, I mean, obviously my focus is on worker organization. And I think that people have been fretting about the amount of union support that went for Trump. There's always a good chunk of the union vote that goes for Republicans. So I'm less concerned about that. But what I do see that's quite interesting, one of the other upsides I see coming out of this election is the clear role that labor played really in tipping the balance in Biden's favor, as imperfect a candidate as Biden was, right? I think, particularly we have to acknowledge the work of Unite Here in door knocking in Arizona, in Nevada, and Pennsylvania. I think it's clear to say that if you didn't have those laid off hotel workers and restaurant workers knocking on doors in those 3 states, they would not have gone for Biden. So I think that the degree to which labor can reassert a position of political leadership in the society, we're going to see a better way forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Barry, for joining us. And can you please tell our viewers where they can find you?
Yes, I'm on Twitter at Eidlin, EIDLIN.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Senator Paul, New York had the highest death rate in the world. How could we possibly be jumping up and down and saying, oh, Governor Cuomo did a great job? He had the worst death rate in the world.
I don't think so, sucker.
No, you misconstrued that, Senator, and you've done that repetitively in the past. They got hit very badly. They've made some mistakes. Or they've developed enough community immunity that they're no longer having the pandemic because they have enough immunity in New York City.
I don't have time for the jibber jabber.
I challenge that, Senator, because I want to, please, sir, I would like to be able to do this because this happens with Senator Rand all the time. You were not listening to what the director of the CDC said, that in New York, it's about 22%. If you believe 22% is herd immunity, I believe you're alone in that. Son of a true nut. There's also the pre-existing immunity of those who have cross-reactivity, which is about a third of the public. Shut up, boo! I'd like to talk to you about that because there was a study that recently came out that pre-existing immunity to coronaviruses that are common cold do not cross-react with the COVID-19. Thank you, Senator Paul. You a nut. And that's the conclusion based on fact.
Bye-bye. Turks, Cenk Ugranic Kasparian with you guys. Donald Trump is in the middle of trying to steal this election. There are hilarious parts to that, including Rudy Giuliani's brain leaking out of his head. We will get to that. There are also disastrous parts of this story. And before Anna even gets there, and then I'll rage about it in a minute as well. But Democrats, hello, hello. Do you effing exist? Do you exist, Democrats? You might want to get up and do something at some point in your lives. Democratic leadership, as always, missing in action, total losers, don't understand politics at all. Yes, I'm upset. Anyway, all right, let's just get to it, Anna. Go ahead.
All right, well, the election saga in the state of Michigan unfortunately continues, and of course it involves the Republican members of the Wayne County Board of Canvassers who initially refused to certify the election results, then later decided to vote unanimously to certify the election results, indicating that the county did vote for Joe Biden over Donald Trump. And then now they're saying that they would like to rescind their votes to certify the election results. Now, let me be clear in stating that they don't have the ability to do it at this point. Now it's up to the Michigan State Board of Canvassers, so the state board of canvassers, in order to certify the election results. But at this point, what the Wayne County Board has done in certifying is done. They can't go back, they can't rescind it. It's now up to the state to make the decision as to whether they're going to certify or not. But it appears that Donald Trump is going to try to influence state lawmakers into intervening. And I'll give you those details. But first, let's talk a little bit about why these Republican members of the Wayne County Board of Canvassers changed their minds and wanted to rescind the certification. So the board's GOP chairwoman, Monica Palmer, and board member William Hartman signed affidavits stating that they only voted for the certification because other members promised a full audit of the county's votes. Palmer's affidavit stated that the Wayne County election had serious process flaws which deserve investigation. I continue to ask for information to assure Wayne County voters that these elections were conducted fairly and accurately. So the argument here is, well, the Democratic members of the board promised us that there would be a full audit. The Democratic members of the board are arguing, look, first off, no one has filed a formal request for an audit yet. So relax. And secondly, we were all under the understanding that this was a non-binding part of the negotiation. And look, the important thing to take away from this is that there's no evidence of fraud. There's no evidence of any wrongdoing in Wayne County. And more importantly, the Republican members of the board specifically wanted to single out Detroit, which overwhelmingly voted for Joe Biden and is also predominantly African-American part of the county, right? When they found some issues with other parts of the county, all of a sudden, they're okay. They want to certify those certain neighborhoods in the county. But when it comes to Detroit, they wanted to essentially prevent the certification of the votes in that area. Of course, that led to many people accusing them of targeting the area due to racist reasons, due to their loyalties to Donald Trump. And it's turned into a giant nightmare, a giant mess. Before I get to more details, Cenk, jump in.
Yeah, so let me be super clear on the facts of why this issue is preposterous. So they asked the Republicans who are now trying to rescind their certification, which by the way, again, is not a thing. That's just legally not possible. But all they're trying to do is create total and utter chaos for their actual goal, which I'll get to in a second. So they say, okay, but you want to certify the areas that are 95% white and Republican, even though they had more of the so-called errors you're worried about than Detroit. And you want to not certify Detroit, which is 80% black, even though it had less errors, less theoretical errors, according to what you're saying. Yes, the white areas should be certified, the black areas should not be certified, even though the white Republican areas had more errors. Well, how do you explain that other than I'm a racist fascist who'd like to steal this election and I don't give a damn about the law? And there's no other explanation. These people are absolutely despicable. Now, the second part of it is, they say, well, there might, that's why we're asking for an audit, where there might have been clerical errors in 100 or a couple hundred votes. Oh, okay, wow, okay, well that might really affect the election in Michigan. You know how much Biden won Michigan by? 157,000 votes, 157,000 votes, not 100 or 200 votes. So let's say they were right and they said, hey, you know what? Let's leave poor white Republican voters alone. Let them make all the errors they like, and don't audit them. Certify right away, right? But these African American Democratic voters, okay? Well, we found that, let's make up a number, 112 clerical errors, which is not even their fault, right? So we should invalidate 157,000 vote lead. That's the actual argument that they are making. So now, why? Why in the world are we even having this insane conversation? Well, because of two main lunatics, obviously Trump and Giuliani, and they will not relent. But that's obvious. The fact that they've lost their minds is super obvious. The emperor has no clothes. Hey, everybody, media, Democrats, Republicans are hopeless as a party. But he has no mind. He has no mind. They're lunatics. But that's not the main reason why. I don't want it to be like, oh, it's so funny. It's so funny. They're trying to steal an election. That's hilarious. It's not hilarious because the real motivation is to go to Michigan and Pennsylvania, and he needs to overturn 3 democratically held elections. So he needs to steal 3 states with no evidence, none. You go to their legislators and go, just give me a different set of electors.
Right.
And we create a constitutional mess. And then the Republicans just declare me the winner, and we steal the election, and we end democracy, and we end America.
So that is definitely the strategy they're turning to because they had absolutely no success by going to the courts. Giuliani made an absolute fool out of himself. Trump's campaign lawyers have dropped out of various cases in key battleground states. And so to your point, Cenk, there are 3 states that the Trump campaign are now targeting in order to overturn the results. Clearly, Michigan is one of them. That's what we're talking about right now. But they're also focusing specifically on Milwaukee. Okay, so in Wisconsin, and they're focusing on Atlanta in Georgia.
All heavily black Democratic cities. And so they want to disenfranchise black voters. We're not that far from them saying, why don't we just bring back slavery? I mean, as long as we're breaking the law and we don't care about the Constitution and we're burning our democracy to the ground and we're saying no black people should have their votes count. I mean, why don't we just go all the way with it? And
Democrats, this is the point you might want to speak up, you idiots. All that the Republicans are doing is putting this message out at 1,000 miles per hour. Yes, it's insane, but you have to counter. That's how politics works. When they scream madness from the rooftops and you don't challenge it, you go, oh, I am above it. When they go low, I go high. And you sit in your stupid basement and don't do anything. Guess what? Poll says 68% of Republicans think the election was rigged. 68% think that the election was completely fraudulent with 0 pieces of evidence. That's the sorry state that we're in. Get up and do something. There's a lot more, including Trump's illegal actions. Let's go.
So before I get to Trump's illegal actions, to your point, Cenk, today Joe Biden and Kamala Harris held a press conference.
Finally.
And one of the questions that was asked had to do with why Biden hasn't pursued any type of legal action in response to Trump's refusal to concede. And Biden argued that it would take too long, that he would rather focus on meeting with Republican governors in order to coordinate his coronavirus response. But I really do feel like, given the new route that Trump's campaign has taken, they really need to have a robust response, a real game plan in place, and they need to stop minimizing the real threat that we have here, because we have seen Republican lawmakers enable Trump and refuse to tell the truth publicly. I'm really tired of Democratic lawmakers like Chris Coons and even Joe Biden himself telling the world, oh, don't worry, these Republicans are talking to me behind the scenes and they're saying that they know who really won and they're not worried. No. I don't care what they're saying privately, because publicly they're saying something completely different and they're refusing to acknowledge the reality of this election. And at this point, you're right, Cenk, Democrats have to do something and Joe Biden has to do something. Ignoring it doesn't mean it's gonna go away.
So they call a press conference and you think, just like I said, finally, oh my God, great. He goes, when he gets a question, apparently he called a press conference to say, no, I'm actively not going to do anything. Look, I don't know that the correct course of action is legal action by Joe Biden, but you might want to open your mouth and talk about how they're trying to steal the election. They are on the opposite side of you. They're right now trying to end democracy because they're un-American. They'd rather have power than have a democracy. You might want to make that point so that people understand what is happening. Nope. Chris Coons, oh, my Republican friends who I love so much, and I constantly go to their prayer breakfasts and we hang out and talk about how much we're gonna send emissaries all across the world to try to imprison and maybe even kill gay people. They tell me that secretly they know they lost, but they're just trying to end our democracy by taking away all black voters' ability to vote. Isn't that funny? Oh, it's such good. Hey, let's fist bump, everybody. Let's fist bump. Oh, such great bipartisanship. Why don't you out them? Do you have any ounce of integrity at all, Chris Coons? Oh no, but that's a private speech between me and my Republican colleague who I care so much more about than I care about you, African-American voters. They're trying to steal your vote. I don't care. My Republican colleague I care about a lot. We're both inside the club and we're both incredibly wealthy and we're great friends. So as he kids around about how they're going to end democracy and eliminate your right to vote, I won't tell you who they are. I'm on Biden's side. So the Republicans are the worst in terms of what they actually do, and the Democrats are the worst in fighting back for their voters, for everybody. It's an insult to everyone who voted for Joe Biden that he refuses to fight back against Donald Trump.
So I have a lot more details that you guys should know about. So when the 2 Republican board members for the Wayne County Board of Canvassers said that they wanted to rescind their vote to certify the election results, it was announced in an interesting way. And I'm reading this from the New York Times. The New York Times wrote that the announcement about the Republicans' attempt to rescind their certification votes arrived in a news release from a Virginia-based public relations firm, Proactive Communications, that has been paid millions for consulting work for Trump's campaign, and whose founder, Mark Serrano, has been a frequent television defender of the president's. Okay, so that's, I think, very relevant. But in addition to that, after the board voted unanimously to certify the election results, Donald Trump hit up the Republican board members. And that has been confirmed by Monica Palmer. That is one of the Republican board members. And she said to the Washington Post, and I quote her, "I did receive a call from President Trump late Tuesday evening after the meeting. He was checking in to make sure I was safe after hearing the threats and doxing that had occurred." So okay. I'm gonna put her accusations of doxing and threats on all that aside for a second. She was asked repeatedly, did Trump pressure you in any way to rescind or try to rescind your vote to certify? And she kept denying it, but every time she denied it, you can just sense from her answers that she was getting more and more uncomfortable. And then it turns out that Donald Trump has invited Michigan state lawmakers to the White House on Friday. Republican state lawmakers. Now, why would he want to do that? Well, at this point, it's really up to the state to certify the election results for the state of Michigan. And so there is legitimate concern that Trump is going to try to influence Republican state lawmakers to play ball.
So let me explain how that works. Eventually, the states send electors to the Electoral College. And so normally in a democracy and in this country, the way that it's worked is whoever wins the state, well, their slate of electors go to the Electoral College, and that's uneventful, right? In this case, Trump is saying, why don't the Republicans in these states just send a different slate of electors? Then it'll go to Congress, and the Republicans in Congress will say, yeah, we accept Trump's slate of electors. We don't actually have to win the election at all. And now, this is not a wild theory. They actually could do that. We had Harvard professor Larry Lessig on now weeks ago to explain this. Jonathan Larson at TYT Investigates wrote a story about it from right after the election at tyt.com that you could check out. So this is a well-known strategy. Democrats go, oh, don't worry, they won't do it. What? Why wouldn't they? You're telling me Donald Trump won't try to cheat? Are you insane? Do you have eyes? Do you have ears? He's been trying to cheat in 1,000 different ways right now. It's not in the past. He's still sitting in the White House trying to steal this election. So Michigan has a Democratic governor, but Republican legislature. So he doesn't need to win the state. He just needs to get the legislature to go, yeah, we don't care who won. We don't care, and we don't even have to throw out the votes. We don't have to do anything. We just appoint a different slate of electors, and then we end democracy. And now the Republicans rule forever. So who cares about democracy as long as we have power?
And also to further reinforce your point, Cenk, the way that Michigan has been set up was already pretty undemocratic. So for instance, it's been heavily gerrymandered in favor of Republicans. So Michigan State's legislature is controlled by Republicans because of the gerrymandering. Democratic candidates actually received more votes in the 2018 election. So I bring that up because Republicans think outside the box. They will find ways to basically rig things in their favor to give themselves an advantage, and to think that they wouldn't be influenced by Donald Trump. I mean, what kind of meeting is that going to be? It's going to be some sort of closed door meeting, I'm guessing. Who knows what kind of promises Trump is going to offer to these people. And here's who I know will be there on Friday. So the Senate Majority Leader will be there, and the House Speaker from the state of Michigan will be there. And there's a little tiny bit of good news. So far, we've heard from the Michigan Senate Majority Leader. His name is Mike Shirkey, and he said that Biden is the president-elect, and that an effort to award Michigan's electoral votes to Trump is not going to happen, according to the news outlet Bridge, Michigan. So that's what he said on the record. But again, he has agreed to meet with Donald Trump on Friday, and he will be there along with the Michigan House Speaker.
Yeah, well, there's two giant caveats to that. The people who are now trying to rescind their certification, they also said Biden had won. And then they're like, oh, after talking to Trump, they're like, just kidding, Trump won. We are now Trump robots. We will do exactly as dear leader tells us. We will steal your democracy away from you and claim to be patriotic, by the way. So, and then number two, Lindsey Graham, among so many other Republicans, said, no, look, we will never nominate a Supreme Court justice in the last year before an election. You can use my words against me. He literally said that. And then when Amy Coney Barrett came up, they confirmed her a week before the election. They're like, yeah, we were lying, who cares? Who cares? We're Republicans, we lie for a living. Why wouldn't we lie now? Yeah, I changed my mind, right? So those two, why do they even go to the White House? To do what? To do what? So what, are they gonna disagree with Trump? No, he's gonna bully them. They're gonna be, okay, I'm so sorry, right? So now we're at real risk. We're at real risk that Republican legislators will turn around and go, we don't care. We award the election to Donald Trump, even though we know for an absolute fact he did not win it. So meanwhile, Democrats are still in their basement. Now, one last thing. So you say, oh, but Cenk, this is what the establishment always says. But Cenk, there's nothing they could do. Our poor beloved Democratic leadership. They have to be the weakest, most neutered people on the planet and hide in their basement forever. You don't understand. What could they possibly do? Well, okay, here's one thing they could do. And of course, they've done the opposite, as I'll show you. There are 2 federal laws that Donald Trump potentially broke by reaching out to people who are certifying the election. It is interfering with an election and voting rights. It's the 2 laws, same 2 federal laws that Lindsey Graham also might have violated in interfering with the Georgia Secretary of State. That's a fellow Republican that outed him. Those are, one of them carries a 1-year prison sentence. What the Democratic leadership could say is, look, we don't know yet whether Donald Trump has broke the law on interfering with this election, but if he has, and we are going to absolutely, positively pursue this to the end of the earth, we guarantee you that Donald Trump will sit in a prison cell for trying to steal this election and for trying to end our democracy, not on our watch. This is a democracy, people's vote counts. We're gonna fight for our voters and we're gonna fight for America. We're way more American than they are. These un-American sons of bitches will not steal this election or end this democracy. And if they try it, Lindsey Graham and Donald Trump will both go to prison. Now we're having a giant national conversation and everybody in America is talking about, should Trump go to prison? Did he break the law? Are they trying to steal the election? Are we having any of those conversations? I mean, some folks in the media say, oh, this is quizzical, oh, this is weird. Oh, they're so strange, right? Democrats say nothing. And the only people talking about stealing the election are the Republicans pretending the Democrats stole it. Oh my God, they're so bad at politics. That's why Joe Biden barely won against the racist, fascist idiot, con man, an obvious con man who's been a con man his whole life. And he could barely beat him this time and they lost to him last time. The Democratic Party is abysmal. And we got to turn that ship around immediately. These guys are going to get killed in 2024. If they manage to actually take the White House in an election they actually won.
All right, we got to take a break, but we're not done with this theme because there's more shenanigans coming from the Trump campaign. A completely unhinged press conference today featuring Rudy Giuliani. We have that and more when we come back.
Everyone who contributes at tyt.com/go helps to get the progressive message out. You guys are the best. So let me do shout outs here. Mark H in Maryland, $50. William in West Virginia, $27. Carissa in Oklahoma, $5. Jude in California, $50. Robin in New Jersey, $50. Steven in California, $420. We love you guys. You help us beat back all the right wingers with all their billionaire money. Let's do it together at tyt.com/go. PragerU is a right-wing media outlet that gets $20 to $25 million a year from billionaire backers. TYT doesn't have billionaires cutting us checks, but the good news is that we don't need them. Okay. Bring it down. TYT can beat the right-wing media and their billionaire funders with contributions of just $200,000 a month from TYT fans donating to tyt.com/go. And we're already halfway to our goal. Look, whether you give $3 or $3,000, your contribution helps us press on. And it might sound like it's a lot of money, but remember, it's only 10% of what they get from billionaires in these giant checks. And with 10% of their money, we're mauling them. And we can continue to get that progressive message out to everybody. And since we're only accountable to you, our fans, and not to corporate backers, we can cover topics like Medicare for All, Green New Deal, and definitely getting money out of politics.
When somebody's the president of the United States, the authority is total, and that's the way it's got to be.
2020 is everything. everything will be decided in 2020, and then we'll either have pessimism a long time, or we'll have optimism.
There is some good news when it comes to elections throughout the country, especially for progressives.
He's struggling in polls. He's trailing Joe Biden in many of these battleground states. And he knows that if he makes it difficult for voters to cast their ballots, especially as we're dealing with this pandemic, well, maybe it'll give him an edge over Biden.
We need to get rid of these people who are in office, who enable these systems that continue to oppress us. Start using your votes and your dollars for the people who want to preserve your community and your humanity.
Defiance is what you need in order to fight for what you know is right. The fight never ends.
Progressive candidates come on this show, we help them, and they've at least got a fighter's chance.
Expand the squad.
Here we go, Squad 2.0. Corey Bush, Jamal Bowman.
And this is why what Cenk and the Young Turks are doing is so important.
This time, it's real. If he wins another term, God knows what he'll do to our government, our democracy, and our way of life.
We need solidarity, and it begins with you.
Who's gonna fix it? Who's gonna fix it? Goddamn right.
I'm back to gaslighting. Did you and I talk about gaslighting on Old School?
Probably.
That boss gaslit all his female employees. People who manipulate others like that make you feel like you're the weirdo. Why won't you punch yourself in the face? What is wrong with you? And you're like, oh my God, I feel so bad. Why didn't I just punch myself in the face and poke my eye out? I'm 47 and I just figured it out like earlier this year.
You figured out somebody was doing it to you, or that you were
that it was that it would have been happening my whole life and I didn't realize it.
Right.
It is wrong to deny any of your fellow Americans the right to vote in this country.
Look, I tell you guys, most important thing is voting in primaries. Primaries.
I hope every American will vote for the candidate and party of his choice, but vote.
We cannot continue to complain about corruption and complain about what's happening in this country and continue to vote for it.
Let's get it right this time. It could be a moment of redemption for what happened in 2016. All right, back on the Young Turks. So on a lighter note, we're in day 2 of the 10 days of Black Friday for shoptyt.com. They've got some great merchandise and some great deals there. So make sure that you check it out, including No Justice, No Peace scarves, which I really enjoy, and Feminist as, you get it. So those just came in. So those are great new products. Check that out when you get a chance. I'm gonna go to our member section. Someone who likes Bernie Sanders made a great point. He said, GOP, there's evidence of voter fraud in the votes from Detroit, Milwaukee, and Atlanta. They forgot to multiply the vote totals by 3/5. You think they won't make that point soon? There is no end, there is no bottom to their barrel. So now the rest of the world is sending us condolences, right? I got some from Canada earlier today, and Humberto Moriera writes in on Super Chat, I'm a Mexican living and working in the US, can't vote, but I'd like to highlight how the United States is a beacon worldwide. I firmly believe that if the US does well, the world will be a better place. There are details where I disagree with TYT, but you are on the best side of history. Thank you, we really appreciate it. And he went on to say, some Mexicans are still holding out hope for the American electoral process and the eventual result and a return to normalcy. Humberto, we're all looking for a return to normalcy, but the guy in the White House will not let us have it, and neither will the entire corrupt Republican Party and the inept Democratic Party. Last one is from Twitch. LMG15 says, congressional Dems are sitting calmly in a burning building. That's an excellent description. I love our members. I love these comments. Keep them going. We do the show together. You could be a member on YouTube by hitting the join button below the video. Everyone else, tyt.com/join. Actually on Twitch, it's the easiest of all. If you have Amazon Prime, it's free for you. And we still get the revenue. It's a giant win-win. Thank you to everybody. All right, Anna, what's next?
All right. While Donald Trump continues to refuse concession in the 2020 presidential election, Rudy Giuliani is still bungling any attempt at legally overturning the election results. Now, they've brought their cases to court. Every time they've done so, judges have basically noticed that there's no evidence and the cases get thrown out. As a result, on Thursday, meaning today, the Trump campaign did drop the lawsuit seeking to block Michigan's results, a sign perhaps that they believe their most likely path to success is a political one, persuading the state's elected Republicans to award Trump a state he lost. Now, Time also reports a similar theme when it comes to Rudy Giuliani, who had an unhinged, crazy press conference this morning. Trump's lawyers don't have to win in court. They only have to wreak enough havoc in the legal system and sow enough doubt among the American public that state boards slow their process of certifying the election results, thus potentially politicizing the process by which states confirm the electoral winner. And so one of the other examples of the chaos they're trying to sow in this electoral process is the Wayne County Board of Canvassers have already voted unanimously to certify the election results, which indicate that Joe Biden won their county. But at the same time, we're hearing from Trump's legal team, including Jenna Ellis, who's the legal advisor for the Trump campaign, saying things like this. She actually tweeted this: breaking, this evening, the County Board of Canvassers in Wayne County, Michigan refused to certify the election results. That's a lie. They did certify the election results. If the state board follows suit, the Republican state legislator will select the electors. Huge win for Donald Trump. I mean, they're trying to steal the election in plain sight. There is no question about it. And during Rudy Giuliani's press conference today, he aired all sorts of grievances regarding so-called widespread election fraud, refused to provide evidence, even though he claimed that he had the evidence, and proceeded to say things that have already been debunked in court. And I'll go through a little bit of that in just a minute, but Cenk, why don't you jump in?
So guys, you have to understand that this is not conjecture and this is not our perspective. When Donald Trump drops the lawsuit, the actual case in Michigan, that means he has no evidence that could overturn the results. So when he goes to the certification process and the representatives to just hand him the electors instead of Biden, he's basically saying, we know we lost this election. There's no earthly way we could prove it in court because we don't have any evidence. So let's just steal it. We're allowed to steal it if you just name different electors. Would that end democracy? Yeah, it would, but who cares? We'd remain in charge. So dropping a lawsuit and going to the electors is by definition admitting we lost, but we'd like to steal it nonetheless. So that's the kind of outrage that we're in right now. Meanwhile, Rudy Giuliani says, I have secret evidence. Sidney Powell, I covered this before. She says, we have a fire hose of secret evidence. Okay, but the good news for you, Rudy, you went to court. Court is where you present this secret evidence. You can't go to court and say, Your Honor, you should definitely rule in our favor, but we're gonna have to keep all of our evidence secret. That's not really how it works. And when he went to court, he got clowned, absolute clowned. So I'll give you more details on that in a bit.
Right, so I mean, they've lost every case. And I think maybe we should watch some of what the press conference looks like. But let me just note, hold on, let me bring up this article, because the New York Times actually did a great job going through all the various accusations, all the various claims that Rudy Giuliani had during this morning press conference. And again, the whole point here is to confuse people, sow chaos. People don't know what's true, what's untrue. Are most people gonna sit down and read the actual court proceedings? Are they gonna read these insanely detailed articles about what actually happened in these court cases? It's unlikely, and that's why the Republicans are winning the messaging war here, especially when it comes to their base of voters. At this point, the majority of Republican voters think that we didn't have a free and fair election, even though all of the evidence proves otherwise. So some of the things that Rudy Giuliani brought up, he made all sorts of accusations about Dominion voting voting systems and how it's being manipulated by Venezuela. There has been no evidence of that whatsoever, none.
And Mars, by the way, also manipulating Dominion, because everybody knows that really we go to Venezuela to run our elections. I mean, how stupid do you have to be to believe that we're letting Venezuela run our elections?
Giuliani further said that the Trump campaign, and he kept mentioning this over and over again, had affidavits proving that nearly 700,000 mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania had been tainted. But no such affidavits have been filed in the campaign's federal lawsuit in Pennsylvania that's seeking to halt the certification of the vote there. Moreover, Giuliani never mentioned the affidavits when he personally appeared at a hearing in the case on Tuesday afternoon. So these are all of the debunked allegations that he brought up during the press conference. Again, he's doing this intentionally to confuse people. And then at the same time, you have the Trump campaign essentially trying to work with Republican state lawmakers to influence the state's decision in either certifying the election results or choosing a slate of electors who could influence the final outcome of this election.
All right, more clownishness. They go to court and they hand in a complaint and they signed for the judge. People are like, what are you doing? They're like, oh, we're just trying to save her time. No, that's not how it works. What you're forging the judge's signature? Are you guys insane? Fraud. So they're like, hey, we didn't do anything wrong. But then they do a second amended complaint and they hand that in without the judge's signature, because obviously they did something wrong, right? It's not a good idea to anger the judge by forging her signature before you start the case. So, but instead of writing second amended complaint, they write second amendment complaint. So it's partly to solve confusion so they could just say, kind of fraud, whatever, just give us the election, who cares, let's steal it. But the second reason is because they're actually genuinely confused themselves. I think that Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani have clear mental decline issues, massive mental decline issues. I think they're both like borderline, past the borderline lunatics. Like if I was their family member, I would try to, I would talk to getting them involuntary mental health counseling because they desperately need it. They don't know what they're doing at all. The Republican Party now run by two literal lunatics.
And look, I mean, Cenk, you've mentioned this before, but I think it's more relevant now than ever. Once Donald Trump is no longer president, once Joe Biden has been inaugurated, Trump is facing serious legal issues. So for instance, the New York Attorney General said that she has 67 indictments on Trump ready to be unsealed on January 21st. That's the day after Inauguration Day. So you can understand his very real personal interest in preventing Joe Biden from taking office. And so this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with an administration, a campaign that's doing anything and everything to protect Donald Trump while simultaneously dismantling our democratic process. And you're right, Democrats are not doing enough to ensure that there is a transition of power. At this point, peaceful transition of power. I don't even think that's possible, but a transition of power. We need to get the ball rolling on that. And thinking that, hey, maybe if we just don't take this seriously, it'll go away, is not the right move. It's not the right strategy.
Guys, if you say, I have no evidence to present in court, but I'd like an election in Michigan where I lost by 157,000 votes to go to me anyway, there's another word for that. That's called a coup. And so that's what they're in the middle of right now. Will they succeed in the coup? I hope not, I don't think so. But you know how you have to fight a coup? By fighting a coup. In this case, you could fight it legally, you could fight it rhetorically, you could fight it politically. So up and at 'em, Democrats. This is the moment where you're supposed to fight against the coup by at least speaking out against it. So far, sound of silence. By the way, progressives, stop listening to Democratic leadership. They're the dumbest people on the planet. You get up and fight Trump and the Republicans. You call it a coup. You call it a stealing of an election. Don't listen to Pelosi and Schumer who are telling you not to say anything. They're idiots. They're the idiots who just lost the election for the House and the Senate. Why would you listen to them? Oh my God, civility in Washington. They would yell at us. Who cares? Get up and do your job.
All right, finally, let's move on to Rudy Giuliani's press conference. And I mean, if you want someone representing you, I can't imagine you'd be comfortable with this guy. So Rudy Giuliani held an early morning press conference where he aired all sorts of already debunked lies regarding alleged widespread voter fraud. Now, again, they've been debunked. Most of these allegations have already been made in court. Most of these cases have been thrown out of court because of a lack of evidence. But there's the substantive part of this, and then there's the aesthetic part of this, which made me uncomfortable. How about you watch the video and you tell me what you think?
And at once, all for Joe Biden. That's like flipping a coin 186,000 times and it lands on
Rudy's hair dye dripping down his face.
Happen. There is no reasonable explanation for the upshoots, straight lines up. I'm not even talking about an angle. I'm talking about some massive straight lines up.
I just saw it pop up on the stream.
So the people on the hot mic are the tech guys who set up the stream for Rudy Giuliani. I mean, and so they didn't realize that their mics were up and that people watching the stream can hear them make fun of Rudy Giuliani and the fact that he had like discolored sweat dripping down the side of his face.
If that's what it is. All right, so look, it's such a clown show that even Rudy's own people are clowning him behind the scenes, but they themselves are clowns, so they leave the mic open so the whole world can hear them clowning their boss. I mean, that right there in a nutshell is exactly what Rudy Giuliani is. And look at that. I mean, he's literally dying out there. And I guess we found the leaker in the Trump administration. And so they, by the way, they said we had a meltdown. We had a meltdown in 2016. That dude is literally melting down, literally. So, I mean, there's this insane conspiracy theory that half the Republican Party, according to a poll, believe might be possible that the Democratic leadership are doing brain juice harvesting.
Obviously.
And I was like, what is that? What is that? I don't even know what that means, you lunatics. Oh, my bad. Republicans always do projection. We always tell you that at TYT. Whatever they're doing, they do. Because if there's brain juice harvesting, that Giuliani picture is probably what it looks like. Ugh. Maybe it's the brain juice leaking out.
Who would want to harvest
people have
that?
Noticed, by the way, they say, well, I don't know, maybe that's literally the swamp leaking out of his brain or the literal crap in his brain leaking out. I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, they've got to get it under control. So this is the unhinged lunatic in charge of Trump's legal team that has presented zero evidence in any court. And this is who 68% of Republicans hate. I believe him completely. The election is rigged. Rudy is right. Can you believe that about a third of this country looks at that lunatic and goes, oh yeah, he nailed it. He's the best lawyer in the country.
Yeah, I can believe it. I'm pretty desensitized to things at this point, following 2016's election. But I have more. So as I mentioned, Rudy Giuliani brought up a bunch of claims about voter fraud that have already been tossed out of court because of lack of evidence. There hasn't been any evidence. And so here's a fun compilation video showing you what that train wreck looked like this morning.
I assume if she's working for the, I assume if she's working for the city of Detroit, that she's a Democrat. Unless you're stupid, you knew that a lot of people were coming over from Camden to vote. They do every year. Happens all the time in Philly. It's about as frequent as getting beaten up at a Philadelphia Eagle football game. Happens all the time, all the time. And it's allowed to happen because it is a Democrat corrupt city. So you see a change as a result of the election in Michigan. If you take out Wayne County, probably the closest they got is from here to the back of that room. We could do like a, did you all watch My Cousin Vinny? You know the movie? It's one of my favorite law movies because he comes from Brooklyn. And when the nice lady who said she saw, and then he says to her, how many fingers do I got up? And she says, 3. Well, she was too far away. The minute you approve this, it's thrown away, gone for eternity. The only thing left is the vote. That could have been Mickey Mouse.
Every claim that he made during that crazy press conference has been debunked. Giuliani quoted a Detroit poll worker named Jesse Jacob, who submitted an affidavit in the case Constantino, versus City of Detroit. Jacob claimed that she had witnessed poll workers in Detroit, a heavily Democratic city, encouraging voters to cast their ballots for Biden, and that while she was working at a satellite location, she was instructed by her superiors not to ask for voters' identification. Wow, that seems serious. But this actually played out in court. On Friday, however, that case was dismissed by a Michigan court judge, Timothy Kenny, who said that several of the charges it contained were rife with speculation and guesswork. Judge Kenny specifically addressed Jacob's accusations, saying they were generalized and asserted behavior with no date, location, frequency, or names of employees. That's just one example. There's a long list of other examples.
So, I don't know if Mickey Mouse or my cousin Vinny is the more important point to address here. So let me just start with the count from the back of the room. He says there's 3 when there's 2. Dude, you're literally doing that right now. You're saying even though Joe Biden won Michigan by 157,000 votes, I'm gonna go in the back of the room and say Trump won by 2. Okay, all right, wait up. So if you have evidence about Michigan, give it to us. He says, well, look, the guys are worried that there was clerical errors in a couple hundred votes in Wayne County. But they're like, wait, war on math. He lost by 157,000. Even if that charge were true, which by the way, they're not even making that. They said maybe there might have been a clerical error in a couple hundred votes. There's more clerical errors in the Republican counties. He says, no, don't recount those. So you want to recount Detroit? Who cares if you pick up a couple hundred votes? No, I don't want to recount Detroit. I just want to take all those votes, which are 80% black, and we just burn them. I don't want them. So let's just not count any of those legal votes. That in itself is a crime, to not count legal votes and to interfere with the counting of legal votes. And that's what Giuliani wants to do. How about in Pennsylvania? They were too far and stuff. They already adjudicated that. They went to court and they said there were no Republican observers in the room. And the judge's like, wait, were there no Republican observers? Well, there was non-zero Republican observers. What the hell does non-zero mean? Yes, there were Republican observers in the room. Okay, so what's the problem? Were they far away as Democrats? Yeah, they were in the same place. So what? Nothing. They've lost every single case. Everything he's saying is an unbelievable lie and said in obviously buffoonish ways. But guys, it's easy for the elites in Washington to snicker at Rudy and for us rational people to look at him and feel both sad and amused at the same time. I get all that, right? But you have to remember, a lot of voters in this country, predominantly Republicans, are not that bright. He just has to get out there and be a sweaty mess and say they cheated, we win, and they'll believe him. They'll believe him because he's the only one pretending to talk about voter fraud. So you have to actually counter him. You have to do the things we're doing. You have to actually give the evidence on the other side. And again, the Democrats continue to be silent with their usual ridiculous strategy of never countering Republicans.
When we come back from the break, we'll talk a little bit about Joe Biden's cabinet and how Rahm Emanuel's name is being floated.
Oh, for God's sake, man.
We'll be back.
Everyone who contributes at tyt.com/go helps to get the progressive message out. You guys are the best. So let me do shout outs here. Mark H. in Maryland, $50. William in West Virginia, $27. Carissa in Oklahoma, $5. Jude in California, $50. Robin in New Jersey, $50. Steven in California, $420. We love you guys. You help us beat back all the right-wingers with all their billionaire money. Let's do it together at tyt.com/go. PragerU is a right-wing media outlet that gets $20 to $25 million a year from billionaire backers. TYT doesn't have billionaires cutting us checks, but the good news is that we don't need them. Bring it down. TYT can beat the right-wing media and their billionaire funders with contributions of just $200,000 a month from TYT fans donating to TYT.com/go. And we're already halfway to our goal. Look, whether you give $3 or $3,000, your contribution helps us press on. And it might sound like it's a lot of money, but remember, it's only 10% of what they get from billionaires in these giant checks. And with 10% of their money, we're mauling them. And we can continue to get that progressive message out to everybody. And since we're only accountable to you, our fans, and not to corporate backers, we can cover topics like Medicare for all, Green New Deal, and definitely getting money out of politics.
When somebody's the president of the United States, the authority is total, and that's the way it's got to be.
2020 is everything. Everything will be decided in 2020, and then we'll either have pessimism a long time, or we'll have optimism.
There is some good news when it comes to elections throughout the country, especially for progressives.
He's struggling in polls. He's trailing Joe Biden in many of these battleground states. And he knows that if he makes it difficult for voters to cast their ballots, especially as we're dealing with this pandemic, well, maybe it'll give him an edge over Biden.
We need to get rid of these people who are in office, who enable these systems that continue to oppress us. Start using your votes and your dollars for the people who want to preserve your community and your humanity.
Defiance is what you need in order to fight for what you know is right. The fight never ends.
Progressive candidates come on this show, we help them, and they've at least got a fighter's chance.
Expand the squad.
Here we go, Squad 2.0. Corey Bush, Jamal Bowman.
And this is why what Cenk and the Young Turks are doing is so important.
This time, it's real. If he wins another term, God knows what he'll do to our government, our democracy, and our way of life.
We need solidarity, and it begins with you.
Who's gonna fix it? Who's gonna fix it? Goddamn right. I'm back to gaslighting. Did you and I talk about gaslighting on Old School?
Probably.
That boss gaslit all his female employees. People who manipulate others like that make you feel like you're the weirdo. Why won't you punch yourself in the face? What is wrong with you? And you're like, oh my God, I feel so bad. Why didn't I just punch myself in the face and poke my eye out? I'm 47 and I just figured it out like earlier this year.
You figured out somebody was doing it to you, or that you were
that it
doing
was that it would have been happening my whole life and I didn't realize it.
Right.
It is wrong to deny any of your fellow Americans the right to vote in this country.
Look, I tell you guys, most important thing is voting in primaries. Primaries.
I hope every American will vote for the candidate and party of his choice, but vote.
We cannot continue to complain about corruption and complain about what's happening in this country and continue to vote for it.
Let's get it right this time. It could be a moment of redemption for what happened in 2016. All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. A quick shout out to one of our sponsors, Math Leaks, as opposed to Die Leaks, which Rudy's a sponsor for. It's to help you tutor your kids from junior high all the way through college. You could use it for yourself, obviously. TYT.com/math. It's actually a great program. Check it out. Also, if you could help us out, that would be great. I want to check in on TYT.com/go. I know that these are tough times for everybody, so only do what you can, guys. Well, we're at 79,995. Can I see 80,000? That'd be $5 from anybody. So TYT.com/go. We appreciate it. You make this show possible. Speaking of you guys, let me go to the members. Greg writes in, brilliant point. He says, pre-election, Joe Biden is suffering from dementia and cannot be president since he doesn't have the mental capacity. Post-election, Joe Biden masterminded and implemented a national voter fraud network across multiple states, including software companies and sophisticated vote switching and foreign governments. And MAGA just rolls with it. Greg, that's exactly right. And they literally believe that with all their heart and whatever little minds they have, and don't see the irony in it at all. Anyway, he's in the member section, tyt.com/join to become a member. Jan Elephant on Super Chat says, love you, TYT. Your hair looks lovely today, Anna.
Thank you, I washed it.
Will you be covering the Laura Ingraham AOC video? Trying to seduce progressives to join the GOP is weird and laughable, but not stupid considering all the hate from the establishment Dems. Well, actually, I'm glad you brought that up because in the post game for the members, I want to tell you about how Tucker Carlson and his team tried to do that to me. So I've never shared that story before. It's really interesting. Let's do it in the post game for members when we have more time. tyt.com/join to become a member. Or if you're watching on YouTube, it's super easy. Hit the join button below. You got to join at the essentials level to get the post games. All right, Anna, what's next?
All right. So far, names that have been floated for Joe Biden's cabinet have been pretty disastrous. Just yesterday, we shared the story of how Louisiana Representative Cedric Richmond, who is a huge fan of fossil fuel money, was named as the director of the Office of Public Engagement. Now we're learning that Rahm Emanuel, who was a failed mayor of Chicago, is being considered for transportation secretary. Now that decision hasn't been made yet. His name is being floated, he's being considered. But I think we should know a little more about Rahm Emanuel, and progressives should certainly push back on this. In fact, one Chicago City Council member, Rosanna Rodriguez Sanchez, wrote an open letter to Joe Biden urging him to avoid choosing Rahm. So here's what she writes. As an elected city council member of Chicago with years as an educator and activist, living, working, and organizing in communities that have been devastated by the policies Emanuel pursued as mayor, I write to insist in the strongest terms possible that you do not choose Emanuel as a staffer for your administration. If you want to root out systemic racism, defend democracy, and build a society that leaves no one behind, all worthy goals mentioned in your victory speech, I can think of a few people worse for the job than the man who earned the nickname Mayor 1% while in office. So Rahm Emanuel did awful things in Chicago, including shutting down public schools in predominantly black neighborhoods. He helped also cover up the police murder of 17-year-old Laquan McDonald back in 2014. He was shot 16 times, by the way, including when he was already laying on the ground. Rahm Emanuel closed 50 public schools in Chicago. Most of the schools served African-American children on the south side and west sides of the city, which are now missing key pillars of their communities. Meanwhile, some of the schools are now being converted into, my favorite, expensive apartment and condo buildings. And obviously I'm being sarcastic there. This is the kind of stuff that enrages me beyond words. Emanuel also refused to end the city's blatantly undemocratic method of assembling a school board whose members are chosen by and accountable to the mayor rather than the people of Chicago. He also handpicked Chicago Public Schools CEO Barbara Byrd Bennett, who was sent to federal prison after pleading guilty to a multi-million-dollar kickback scheme involving public school money. A lot of wins here, but there's more. I mean, there's so many other details that I can get to, but Cenk, I wanted to give you a chance to share your thoughts.
Yeah, first of all, those good folks in Chicago are doing a petition to make sure that Rahm Emanuel doesn't go on the cabinet. We'll have the link in the description box below if you're watching this later on YouTube or Facebook. It's not our petition, it's their petition. I want to support it. So Rahm Emanuel is the guy who famously said when he was chief of staff for Barack Obama, called liberals effing retarded, okay? That's his words, not my words. I just wanted you to understand what he thinks of progressives. He was Obama's chief of staff. He despises progressives. He loves money in politics. His campaigns were drenched in money. And then in a shocking development, he wound up giving giant breaks and deals in the ways that Anna explained, especially for his real estate developers, private education donors, you name it. Every one of those categories, he wound up helping them instead of the voters and citizens of Chicago. What a wonderful coincidence. And by the way, the media is like, oh, Rahm Emanuel, isn't he a great fighter for Democrats? Hilarious, hilarious. Now, no one props up the mythology of Rahm Emanuel and how tough he is. He's only tough on his own voters.
Yes.
He's never, ever been tough on a single Republican. He's a total weakling and coward when it comes to fighting Republicans.
His policies were so disastrous to African-American residents in Chicago that it led to an exodus of 200,000 black residents. 200,000. They got priced out of Chicago because of his policies. So for instance, through Chicago's tax increment financing program, which supposedly exists to fight blight in the city, Emanuel has given away enormous amounts of money to neighborhoods and institutions that are anything but blighted. Some of his greatest hits include giving $55 million to DePaul University to purchase a new basketball stadium, millions funneled to tourist magnet Navy Pier through an elaborate shell game, and another $2 billion in subsidies for luxury mega developments on his way out the door. Awful, awful, awful.
Yeah, blighted neighborhoods. I meant luxury mega condos for all my donors to take advantage of. And Biden's considering Rahm Emanuel. Why? Why would you consider? Why don't you just consider Joe Lieberman? Oh my God, I shouldn't have said it. He probably will. Why don't you just consider Mitch McConnell for your cabinet? Maybe we can get him out of the Senate. Is there anyone you wouldn't consider for your cabinet that is this deeply conservative and this deeply corrupt within the Democratic Party? By the way, not just within the Democratic Party, he's also considering Republicans. So I guess if you're considering Republicans, maybe Rahm Emanuel does make sense. So far, Biden's team, one good note, he picked Ron Klain as chief of staff. That was great. Everything else has been a disaster. Conservative after conservative on the cabinet and being considered, and won't fight for his voters at all right now. All right, we have so much more in the postgame. Hit the join button below or tyt.com/join, including the story of how Tucker tried to get me to go on Fox News. It's an amazing story. We'll be right back for the members. Everyone who contributes at tyt.com/go helps to get the progressive message out. You guys are the best. So let me do shout outs here. Mark H in Maryland, $50. William in West Virginia, $27. Carissa in Oklahoma, $5. Jude in California, $50. Robin in New Jersey, $50. Steven in California, $420. We love you guys. You help us beat back all the right wingers with all their billionaire money. Let's do it together at tyt.com/go. PragerU is a right-wing media outlet that gets $20 to $25 million a year from billionaire backers. TYT doesn't have billionaires cutting us checks, but the good news is that we don't need them. Okay. Bring it down. TYT can beat the right-wing media and their billionaire funders with contributions of just $200,000 a month from TYT fans donating to tyt.com/go. And we're already halfway to our goal. Look, whether you give $3 or $3,000, your contribution helps us press on. And it might sound like it's a lot of money, but remember, it's only 10% of what they get from billionaires in these giant checks. And with 10% of their money, we're mauling them. And we can continue to get that progressive message out to everybody. And since we're only accountable to you, our fans, and not to corporate backers, we can cover topics like Medicare for all, Green New Deal, and definitely getting money out of politics.
When somebody's the president of the United States, the authority is total, and that's the way it's got to be.
2020 is everything. Everything will be decided in 2020, and then we'll either have pessimism a long time, or we'll have optimism.
There is some good news when it comes to elections throughout the country, especially for progressives.
He's struggling in polls. He's trailing Joe Biden in many of these battleground states. And he knows that if he makes it difficult for voters to cast their ballots, especially as we're dealing with this pandemic, well, maybe it'll give him an edge over Biden.
We need to get rid of these people who are in office, who enable these systems that continue to oppress us. Start using your votes and your dollars for the people who want to preserve your community and your humanity.
Defiance is what you need in order to fight for what you know is right. The fight never ends.
Progressive candidates come on this show, we help them, and they've at least got a fighter's chance.
Expand the squad.
Here we go, Squad 2.0. Corey Bush, Jamal Bowman.
And this is why what Cenk and the Young Turks are doing is so important.
This time, it's real. If he wins another term, God knows what he'll do to our government, our democracy, and our way of life.
We need solidarity, and it begins with you.
Who's gonna fix it? Who's gonna fix it? Goddamn right.
I'm back to gaslighting. Did you and I talk about gaslighting on Old School?
Probably.
That boss gaslit all his female employees. People who manipulate others like that make you feel like you're the weirdo. Why won't you punch yourself in the face? What is wrong with you? And you're like, oh my God, I feel so bad. Why didn't I just punch myself in the face and poke my eye out? I'm 47 and I just figured it out like earlier this year.
You figured out somebody was doing it to you, or that you were
that it was that it would have been happening my whole life and I didn't realize it.
Right.
It is wrong to deny any of your fellow Americans the right to vote in this country.
Look, I tell you guys, most important thing is voting in primaries. Primaries.
I hope every American will vote for the candidate and party of his choice, but vote.
We cannot continue to complain about corruption and complain about what's happening in this country and continue to vote for it.
Let's get it right this time. It could be a moment of redemption for what happened in 2016. Back on the Turks post game for you guys. Tonight is game night on Twitch, so I wanted to make sure everybody knew that. So it's at 9 o'clock Eastern. Anna, do you know who's playing tonight?
Yes, so if you are on the Twitch channel as a viewer, you have an opportunity to play Among Us with Brett, John, Jordan Ewell, and Ablina Sabrina, who is an activist. So that should be a good time. Definitely check it out. Go to twitch.tv/TYT.
All right, rock and roll. Okay, we got a lot more stories for you guys. I wanted to get that good, fun plug in before I get angry again. So let's go forward.
All right, so a woman named Tootie Smith, and that is her name, went on Tucker Carlson to vent about coronavirus rules regarding social distancing and how people should be careful during the holidays. And she decided to compare it to something pretty serious. Now, just so you know who this Tootie Smith is, she's currently serving on the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners and will soon be the chair after winning her November election. Let's watch.
We've been in a lockdown for 8 months now, Tucker. People understand what to do to be healthy. We have been browbeat over the head with wearing masks in public, which I do, by the way, with social distancing, to stay home if you're sick, be clean. I think our people have the intelligence, the education, and the independence to make their own decisions. We are adults. We do not need to be treated as second-rate slaves in our own homes.
Good for you.
Of course, that was his response. Of course, that was his. So Clackamas County is in Oregon. That's where she's from. Just wanted to make that clear. And yeah, they're concerned about the surge in coronavirus cases that we're experiencing all throughout the country. Comparing that to slavery, second-rate slaves. I don't know, Cenk. Why don't share your thoughts on this?
Yeah. Are there first-rate slaves? What the hell are you talking about? And you're comparing doctors telling you, please wear masks, and then the government officials saying, hey, you know what? If we don't stop this contagion, this virus, it will continue to hit and affect more and more Americans. There's already 250,000 dead Americans. 250,000 dead. And so if you're going inside of the restaurant or you're within 6 feet of each other, etc., wear a mask. And so we're trying to help with the public health. And she's like, slavery. Do you have any idea what happened in slavery, you moron? So no educated person would talk about doctors trying to help you not get sick and die with slavery, where people were whipped, murdered, raped, sold as property, had their kids taken away from them and sold to other people. Do you have any idea what kind of pain that must have been? Any idea? Oh, I had to wear a mask. Second-rate slavery. And Tucker Carlson's like, good for you. Way to minimize people's pain and pretend that if white Republicans are ever put upon in any way that they didn't agree upon, well, that it's the same as slavery. Because in their ridiculous, privileged minds, they think like, if I don't rule over you and tell you what to do with your body, you're not allowed to do the, you got a pregnancy, I'm gonna tell you exactly what to do with it. Sex, no, I'm gonna tell you exactly what to do. Marijuana, I'm gonna tell you exactly what you can consume and not consume. I'm gonna control your life. You wanna control my life to help me? Control my life? Make me wear a mask so I don't infect other people? How dare you? This is like slavery. It's the worst form of privilege. They sicken me.
Yeah, it really is. And just to, the state wants people to do reasonable things. Like, I don't know why this has to be so difficult. And I get it, like, people are acting as if the state is telling them, you have to, like, we're on lockdown. You're not allowed to leave your house. That's not what they're saying. So officials, excuse me, officials say these risk reduction measures are critical in limiting the spread of coronavirus, reducing risk in communities more vulnerable to serious illness and death, and helping conserve hospital capacity. That's a big deal because we don't have enough hospital beds. The 2-week freeze measures include limiting gatherings, both indoors and outdoors, to no more than 6 people total, and for no more than 2 households. So it's these rules are gonna last until December 2nd. There are other restrictions, such as restaurants being takeout only for a little while. Gyms are being closed for obvious reasons. And then limiting capacity in spaces that are open, okay? So local health officials said social gatherings have been driving the increase in coronavirus cases. Officials add many coronavirus cases have been linked to Halloween parties, weddings, and birthday parties. Cases in Oregon now total 53,779 since the pandemic first began. So she doesn't really have any regard for other people's lives, that's clear. She's comparing something that's pretty logical to something that was an awful part of this country's history, that was not logical in any way, that was cruel and horrendous. How do you unite with people like this?
Okay.
Right? How do you have a conversation? How do you negotiate with people like this? You can't. They're unreasonable.
You can't even talk sense to them. So we have dear family friends who are Republicans and now are in the cult, and so they believe everything Trump said. They're elderly. So the family friend who's a really good friend of my dad is in his 80s. They have coronavirus now because they went to a church without masks on because they believed that that it's no big deal. So I hope to God that they are okay and they survive. I don't know yet, but it's has deadly consequences. So we had already broken a record a couple of weeks ago when we had 100,000 cases in the country, more than we've ever had and than any country's ever had. Now it's nearly 200,000 cases a day. Guys, the election is over. So this, if you thought, oh yeah, it's propaganda for the Democrats, it said all the doctors in the country are lying on purpose to help the Democrats, and it's a global conspiracy, because they believe in insane things like that. They think all the climate scientists in the world, all of them, from India, Russia, China, US, Norway, everywhere, they're all lying. The temperature readings do not show that the Earth is getting warmer. Now they think all of the doctors in the world are lying, but now the election is over, so why would they continue to quote unquote lie? Nope, I'm not gonna believe reality. So now we have out of control virus, worse than anywhere on the planet by a lot, because we have moron and cult leader in office who's unfortunately influencing all these people. And then look at their idiotic way of thinking. They say, oh, they just want to control our lives. Like Tucker Carlson with this insane segment that he did before. They're gonna, as soon as Joe Biden wins, they're gonna make you drink Starbucks coffee every day. Why would we care what you drink? Why would we care, you idiots? And the reason is, it's projection. They want to control every part of your life, just as I told you earlier. They assume we want to control their lives and that we're enjoying putting masks on them because, we now have control over you. I don't give a damn what you put over your mouth, your head. I don't care about your body. I don't care what you consume. I don't care at all. The reason for the mask is because of how it affects other people. So you can say, oh, now next thing you know, you're gonna get to try to control my fist. No, you can do anything with your fist as long as it doesn't actually land on anyone else's face, okay? That's an obvious law. And so at the end of the day, they think we get a kick out of it. We don't. I love Thanksgiving. I want my family over for Thanksgiving. I want my mom to cook the delicious turkey that she cooks, and I want to celebrate it with my loved ones. But I'm worried about infecting my 83-year-old dad, 73-year-old mom, if we get too close, if we do it indoors, etc. So that's why they say be careful. Not because they enjoy oppressing my mom and dad, you idiots. It's because we're trying to save their lives.
And look, I think the biggest problem here is that messaging from lunatics like the Tootie, the woman that we just heard from, resonates with some people in this country, not because they feel like, doing reasonable things like, smaller gatherings, staying away from people who are vulnerable to the virus, not because they think that it's unreasonable, but because a lot of them have been hurt economically as a result of the federal government essentially abandoning them during this pandemic. There hasn't been another round of stimulus. Small businesses are shuttering throughout the country. So if you're a gym owner, you're angry. You're legitimately angry, and you have good reason to, because you see this as government overreach, right? The government forces you to shut down, but you're not given a lifeline in order to continue, your business once this pandemic is finally over. So there's a lot of negligence on behalf of our federal lawmakers. There's a lot of anger in the country as a result of that, and unfortunately, lunatics like Tootie end up resonating with people because of that anger, because of that frustration.
Oh, well, I'll end this otherwise disastrous story on a fun note. So when you take the lunatic Rudy and now the new lunatic Tootie, I guess you would have Rudy, Tootie, fresh and fruity.
Not fresh.
Though not
but definitely
fresh.
Loony.
Definitely not fresh. When your brain juice is leaking from your head like Rudy's was, it's the least thing that could be called fresh. So thank you, Anna, for always delivering the truth on TYT.
That's what I do. That's what I do. All right, you want to talk about your Tucker Carlson thing?
Yeah. So, when I was running for office, Tucker Carlson reached out to me. Now, there is some background to this. We debated at Politicon a couple of years back. Wasn't much of a debate. If you saw it, weirdly, Tucker Carlson agreed with almost everything I said, and we had spent some time backstage where it was a good conversation and an intelligent conversation, and so and I thought that he was an interesting character. Now I'm already familiar with what he does on air. This is a couple of years back, so I was a little surprised at how pleasant a conversation it was backstage, and then I was super surprised at how he basically didn't fight back in the debate / conversation. And so that was an interesting turn of events. And then some emails back and forth in the meantime. Then I run for Congress and they reach out to me. But both in the emails from the different people in his staff, and I don't want to out anyone, but I am talking about this because of the turn that Tucker's taken. So in the last year and a half, I think he's gone from terrible on air with interesting, points to make about not going to further war. I agree with that. And he's realized that Americans hate big business that's crushing their souls. And that's a good positive development that people on the right wing realize that, and that we actually have to fight against corporate power for real American citizens. So in the ways that he is right, I want to encourage it, right? But so I thought maybe they're reaching out to find common ground, and Tucker even called me when I was running for Congress. I won't divulge anything that was in the private conversation, but I now realize, looking back at all the different solicitations and how they're like, oh, we could have you on air, we could have you on air. Every time I clarified, I'm happy to go on air and talk about the parts where we agree. I'm happy to talk about the parts where we disagree, but I will never not point out our disagreement, okay? And so they tried a couple times, etc., and then all of a sudden they stopped. Well, it turns out it's kind of a grooming process. And so they're like poking, prodding, cajoling, and I don't want to say seducing. That sounds too wrong in this context.
You already used all sorts of words that made me uncomfortable, so
I know, right? So why does we'll finish it? Anyway, come this way, we're gonna agree, etc. And then if you notice, even good progressives that go on air on Tucker's show, on Fox News, they almost never disagree. And so there'll be some Fox News programs where disagreement is allowed, or they'll have a Democratic consultant on. But 9 out of 10 times, it'll be to say, now Republicans are of course right about everything, but we're so sorry for what we've done. So there's 1 or 2 guys that'll pipe up, and you'll be like, hey, look at that. It kind of somehow got on air on Fox News. But overall, they're trying to find people who will help them make their point without ever showing dissent on air. And so then you become a useful tool for their propaganda. And if you ever say to them at any point, yes, but I'm not going to agree with you on everything, they go, no, that's it, don't put them on air. Okay, so by the way, this comes from the people who say they are in favor of a free marketplace of ideas. So I see no such thing, and that's how this game is played. So just, and I hate to do it, but for the folks who made it through that process, if you'll notice, they almost never disagree with Tucker on air.
They want to make you drink Starbucks every day from now until forever.
Why? Why would we? And as I've pointed out before, if we're gonna make you drink anything every day, it would be too strong coffee.
We're not gonna make anyone drink anything.
TYT. No, Anna, we're gonna make them drink it because they're gonna realize it's delicious and organic and fair. They don't care about organic and fair trade. What am I talking about? But they're like, wait, that coffee's too good and too strong. God damn it, they made me drink it.
All right. Well, sometimes people get seduced by exposure, power, you get the picture. And our next story actually has that theme, so let's discuss. Trump crony and campaign legal advisor Jenna Ellis likes to make these media appearances where she defends Donald Trump. She enables his absolute ridiculous lies about widespread voter fraud and how he allegedly won the election by a landslide. I've heard her make that argument. But it turns out that Ellis, much like other Republicans, absolutely hated Donald Trump when he was running in 2016. She had a lot of negative things to say about him that I want to go to right now, including repeatedly slamming then candidate Trump as an idiot, who was boorish and arrogant and a bully whose words could not be trusted as factually accurate. She called comments he made about women disgusting and suggested he was not a real Christian. But the way she talks about him now is very different, probably because she's making that paper. Watch.
What you have heard, I'm sure, in the fake newspapers tomorrow will be one of 2 things. Either there was not sufficient evidence that we've presented, or we spoke too long. Okay, so what you've heard now is basically an opening statement. This is what you can expect to see when we get to court to actually have a full trial on the merits, to actually show this evidence in court and prove our case. This is not a Law and Order episode where everything is neatly wrapped up in 60 minutes. For those of you who are here in this room or have maybe tuned out in other networks, clearly you've never been court reporters. Trials take time. Putting on evidence takes time. This is basically an opening statement so the American people can understand what the networks have been hiding and what they refuse to cover, because all of your fake news headlines are dancing around the merits of this case and are trying to delegitimize what we are doing here.
Yeah.
They have not provided evidence. Their cases keep getting thrown out of court because they're not providing evidence. And anytime they do provide an affidavit, the judge will usually find that it was hearsay, or will find that the person making the accusations has no credibility because all of the other poll workers have a completely different perspective on what actually occurred on election day, and they're all in agreement that there was no voter fraud. I mean, in case after case. Anyway, but this woman knows that he's a liar. Like, she said it in 2016 when she thought that he had absolutely no chance of winning the election. Then he wins, and then she realizes, oh, well, that's where the gravy train is. So I'm gonna go ahead and like basically go against my own principles, go against what I know in my heart, and move forward in supporting the insane claims coming from this insane man and all of his cronies. It's so pathetic and sick. Jesus.
So they have lost every single case. She said, this is an opening statement. No, you already had an opening statement in those court cases, and those court cases already concluded. You had a concluding statement and you lost. That's because you presented no evidence. So now she says, oh, no, now we're starting all over again. And by the way, a lot of them are not even legal cases. In Michigan, they shut down their legal case because they couldn't present any evidence. They voluntarily withdrew it. Now they're just going for the steal. So now they're saying, well, the Michigan Republican legislators should give us the election even though we lost. And we couldn't win in court, we had no evidence. There is no voter fraud, who cares, let's steal it, it's a coup. It's a flat out coup, right? And she says, it's an opening statement. And in a sense, it is, because they've moved on to the new stage, which is, we don't really care what happened. We know we're not gonna win in court. All we're trying to tell you is all of the Republican voters, once Trump tells you something, remember, you do it. There's a guy who wrote an op-ed recently. He said he was at Jonestown, that cult that killed themselves by drinking the Kool-Aid because their cult leader told them to. And he said, what I'm seeing with Trump is the same exact strategy. Drink the Kool-Aid, drink the Kool-Aid, drink the Kool-Aid. So she comes out and says, this is our opening statement. Now, we will tell you that we won the election without any evidence at all. And we will now tell you that we are the winners even though we didn't actually win. Drink the Kool-Aid. Now, look at how despicable she is. She's a person of no character at all. And it's not just about Jenna Ellis, it's about all of them, and I don't mean just all of Rudy Giuliani and Trump's lackeys. I mean all the Republican elected officials today. Now, 2.5 weeks past the election, who know, all of them know for a fact that he lost the election and that he's lost every court case and that he's presented no evidence. They're all saying, we don't care. We don't care about democracy at all. And we're now going for the steal. That's what we're going for. And so that's it. We hate America, we hate democracy, and we're gonna try to do a coup, basically. So that's what they're up to. And they all have no character at all. And almost all of them have said the same things. Lindsey Graham said the same things Jenna Ellis said, and worse about Donald Trump. Then he turned around and said, well, I need access to power. He admitted it. He said, I need access to Trump, so now I'm saying nice things about him. Ted Cruz said he was basically gonna kick Donald Trump's ass for calling his wife ugly and his dad a murderer. Then he turned around, phone banked for him, and now he goes around saying, oh yeah, I think maybe Trump won the election, even though he got less votes, that's what I think, yeah. Now he's become his fascist boot-licking lackey. And you saw Jenna Ellis for yourself, the earlier quotes, ignorant, bully, and what did she say? He's not a real Christian.
Not a real Christian.
You know what that means?
Yeah.
That means he's a fraud, a fake.
Just like her.
And she knows it. Now she turns around and goes, oh, don't believe the fake news who tell you about the evidence. Ignore the evidence and believe us. Even though she knows herself that Donald Trump is a fraud, and now she's getting paid to help that fraud. So she's lying on purpose to all of you.
Let me give you some more of her tweets from 2016, obviously prior to Trump winning the election. This one's from February 28th, 2016, when she tweeted, Trump cannot handle criticism. This is insanely dangerous to the fundamental American value and inalienable right of freedom of speech, okay? She also said on February 29th of 2016, Trump's values are not conservative, but they're also not American.
Now she is trying to help kill the most American value of all, democracy, on behalf of Donald Trump, because he's paying her. Absolutely sick. She's sick. Rudy Giuliani and his leaking brain is sick. Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham are sick. Mitch McConnell is sick. They're all sick. They hate this country. They're unbelievably un-American. And isn't it outrageous that you're only hearing that here? Meanwhile, cable news thinks that they're being tough by laughing. Oh, they're trying to steal democracy. And the Democratic Party is AWOL, nowhere to be found. Well, at least we fight for you. and we're not afraid to tell people the truth. Those are Jenna Ellis's actual quotes, and then you saw her actual video. Anyone who says that she's an honest person is lying to you to protect her feelings. I thought facts didn't care about feelings. I was positive about that. I know I heard that somewhere. And to protect Donald Trump's feelings and Rudy Giuliani's feelings, but most importantly, to protect Republican voters' feelings. Because if you tell them the truth, they're gonna get hurdy-wordy. And they're gonna feel bad about themselves. Oh, that'll hurt our ratings. Oh, we don't wanna hurt our ratings. Oh, okay, even though 68% of Republicans say that this election was rigged and they've lost their minds, even though 50% of Republicans think that the Democratic leadership runs a child sex trafficking ring, we don't wanna offend the feelings of Republicans. I don't mind telling you the reality. That 50% has lost its mind. So these deranged lunatics now have taken over a party in America. And that is super dangerous to all of us and to America itself.
All right, look, I feel like we're at a point where we can use a little bit of a breather, we can use a break. So I'm ending the stories, but I'm also gonna end the post game with this tweet from Steve Hofstetter, who I miss, and I think you'll really appreciate, Cenk.
All right.
Ben Shapiro is 5'4", but lists his height as 5'9". That makes two places where Ben Shapiro wishes he had 5 more inches.
Oh.
Man. Murder, she wrote. Murder, she wrote.
Well, if you're 5'4" and you list yourself as 5'9", it appears that your feelings won over the facts. So why would you lie about that? Think about how pathetic that is to lie about it. Oh, no, I'm taller than I appear. It's so sad. All right. All right, guys. Check out Game Night on Twitch, twitch.tv/TYT at 9 o'clock Eastern tonight. Super fun there. Angry Cenk won't be there. And neither will so-called happy Cenk. What happened to Dr. Cenk after all this, right? I'll teach you how to be happy, and then an hour and a half straight of screaming. Anyways, you know the news pisses me off, and I'm here to fight for you guys, because apparently the Democrats won't. Anyway, I gotta get off the air. I love you guys. We'll see you tomorrow.